In a world far, far away, where spirits live in everything around, there is a man who can communicate with them. Thanks to his ability, he managed to become a member of Hero Squad, a team of 5 people, and together they defeated the Demon King. A man with such a unique ability is called the Universe. From a bird's eye view, a majestic, enchanting landscape of the kingdom of Fulish opened up. In the center of the kingdom stood a magnificent castle, a true architectural masterpiece, and a symbol of the greatness of this state. A dark-haired boy with a clear look of surprise on his face was actively gesturing and asking questions about what was happening. He was curious about what was going on and what could have been the closest reason for such unexpected behavior from his colleagues. The brave hero who managed to defeat the Demon King himself looked at him sternly with a strict, impassive gaze. Behind him stood the entire team. Each of them made an invaluable contribution to this exhausting battle. A sinister, majestic man in heavy armor informed Universe firmly, confidently, and without a shadow of doubt. He was not their comrade at all, but only responsible for various magical devices. The statement by Root was supported by a young blonde woman. She was touching up her freshly painted lips. She said that during the expeditions, this boy did not talk to anyone and always kept to himself. Another lady from the team also decided to speak and added that Universe, thanks to his unique ability, seemed to look down on everyone else. Her gaze was even sterner and more frightening than that of the knights. The man who suddenly found himself in such an awkward situation stumbled over his words from nerves. He tried to explain that he did not know how to communicate with people at all, but still tried very hard to do his job. The hero smiled wickedly and declared that he did not understand at all what that Universe was babbling about. His gaze was filled with arrogance, and he clearly had not a drop of warm feelings toward the boy opposite him. This became increasingly obvious. Universe seemed to freeze in surprise. He was confused, listening to these insults from his team. But the guys did not calm down. They asked why he thought he was of any use if he had done nothing special. The man was completely confused and asked, what happened to his magical horse? Where was the spirit sitting? In response, the hero only rolled his eyes. Thus, he revealed his hidden intentions. His gaze showed. He was planning something not entirely good. The pond-haired young man walked forward, holding his head high and confident in every step. He spread his arms to the sides and with a barely noticeable smile declared that everyone could handle the service. Approaching the magical horse, he kicked it hard and called it a useless piece of iron. The Universe probably did not expect such rudeness, especially from him, a teammate. The man immediately rushed to his incredible creation and shouted its name at the top of his voice trance. He turned rather reservedly, but with a hint of excitement, to the savior of this world and asked him to stop and cease all kinds of mockery. Unaware of it, the boy involuntarily placed his hand on the girl's forearm, who was dressed in clothing very much resembling a nun's habit. In response, she turned her displeased gaze toward his hand, showing that she did not approve of his action. In an instant, as if she had no time to hesitate, she quickly swung and struck so accurately that he immediately stopped right between his legs, seized by unbearable, unexpected pain. The boy clenched his legs in pain and fell to his knees. It seemed he was no longer able to even try to get up. The unbearable pain pierced his body and left no chance for relief, and the girl hissed an insult at the young man. She had already told him that he must not touch her. The girl hated it when people she did not like tried to get close to her, and her face showed it pure anger and disgust. The man who could not get up reached out to the horse lying under the foot of the savior and asked if it was all right. The hero simply smiled boldly without any special emotions and said the usual, simple truth. The Universe cared more about its own affairs than the team members. In the blonde's opinion, this situation looked disgusting and unacceptable. And then his face twisted from a sudden thought that struck his head. He raised his head and boldly told the boy not to worry. They would patch him up too, just like this pile of garbage. Universe woke up only in the evening. He lay all battered on a pile of various trash, from simple bags to buckets, boards, and other junk. As soon as the young man opened his eyes, dark rain clouds appeared before him. They had already begun to cover the sky with their gloomy mass. It seemed that even the weather was not on his side that day. The man covered his face with his palm, which was already trembling with irritation and anger. It seemed that more than anything, he just wanted to cry like a little child. He remembered that in the heroic team, everyone had their own important role. The hero himself was to become the next king and get engaged to the princess. The warrior was to become the commander of this country, the priestess a great saint, and the young sorceress a great sage. Universe was meant for this. Even he himself did not know. Later, he worked in the department of research and repair of magical devices. The man was crafting a magical horse. Nearby lay a pile of books, various tools, flasks, and solutions, each with its own purpose. The man pushed the bag aside and joyfully announced that he had finally healed it, which meant that very soon it would run again like new. The workers who worked in the same place turned around in surprise. They did not understand what the conversation between universe and the machine was about. The man was walking down the corridor all alone. It seemed he was completely immersed in thought and did not notice the people passing by. He carefully held a folder with papers in his hands as if something really important was hidden there. As he was walking down the corridor, he suddenly noticed something interesting on one of the walls. It caught his attention, and he stopped to take a closer look. A news board hung on the wall. It looked quite ordinary, but in the very center there was a huge poster with a white mustached hero who had recently mocked Universe. The man smiled when he saw this poster, as if nothing had happened, and then remembered Typhon. He became curious about how she was, because she was supposed to get married. The young man put the thought in his head that today he would visit the girl if he had a free minute, and went on. Suddenly he was stopped. One of his colleagues said that Gotsuin was calling him. When the boy entered the boss's office, he, without looking up from reading, cast a brief glance at him, and without even putting the sheet he was holding on the table, said that Universe had been fired. The boy froze in place, as if his legs suddenly sank into an endless void beneath the ground. He was in deep shock. Such a turn of events was a complete surprise to him. Universe asked why Gatsuin made such a decision. The boss turned his back, settled comfortably in his chair, and said that this boy was truly disgusting. When he repairs, he talks to the devices. He wanted to explain himself, awkwardly stammering, because he couldn't express himself properly, and began talking about the spirit inside the magical device. Gatsun did not even listen to the young man to the end. He asked why he couldn't speak loudly, and clearly the boss was already tired of listening to his mumbling, and the colleagues especially complained that Universe was not very friendly. The man showed by his entire appearance that he had no intention of listening to that boy. Yet despite this, he stubbornly continued to justify himself because his work was dear to him. Gatsuin did not leave the young man alone and persistently kept interrupting him. During the explanation, he stated that the name Universe engraved on the devices he created would be removed and replaced with his own name. Universe's devices, they were loved by all the clients, so thanks to his work, Gatsun was highly valued. The man grimaced and added that he would become official, apologized, although it sounded more like another mockery, and added that he was grateful for the work done. It was a clear day. Children happily walked down the street. Adults bustled here and there. Some admired the weather. Others hurried about their business. But Universe was by no means pleased with this. He was depressed and slowly moved his feet. He sighed heavily, the tension released from his body, and he was drawn into deep thoughts where it would be easier and more comfortable for him to find a new job that would match his skills and desires. Suddenly he heard two girls running quickly somewhere. They were chatting about how today the princess, the spirit of the wind, was finally marrying the savior who defeated the demon king. The young man remembered what exactly he was thinking about in the corridor, but completely forgot that he was supposed to visit Typhon's wedding. The ceremony itself took place right outside. The weather was wonderful, so nothing prevented the crowd of people from lining up to watch the wedding of the hero and the princess, the spirit of the wind. The venue on the hill was much less crowded, only the most important guests. In the center stood an arch and a bell. The spirit of the wind was a little confused, and it seemed that she was puzzled by what was happening. Universe threw a dark cloak over himself so as not to stand out and to completely blend in with the crowd. He froze, enchanted, looking at the bride. Typhon looked simply majestic in this outfit. The man looked at the beautiful ceremony and smiled. Sincerely, from the bottom of his heart, he wished the princess, who was the central figure of this solemn event, to be absolutely happy. The girl with a headscarf, the same one who was a member of the hero squad, suddenly spoke loudly. Today they are marrying the princess, the spirit of the wind, and the hero who saved this world. The universe was trying hard not to succumb to negative emotions and not to get upset, but it was obvious. He was gripped by anxious thoughts that gave him no peace. The spirits of this world are very kind. They sincerely rejoice and feel satisfaction when there is an opportunity to help people, and it is important to them. It seems that it is a great honor for them to swear allegiance to someone. But the young man was sure, under any circumstances, a person should not allow himself to put himself above the spirits, especially when it comes to those who have sworn allegiance to him. The princess was getting more and more agitated. It seemed she was not even trying to hide her emotions. She lowered her gaze to the floor and did not even look at her fiancé. People noticed that Typhon was very nervous but decided, nothing strange, it should be so, because her husband will be the hero of this country. But something touched the girl, and she turned to the crowd. Typhon happily smiled at the guests and waved her hand to them, creating a warm, friendly atmosphere. It was clear, she was glad to see these people and it seemed, felt more emotions toward them than toward her future husband. Suddenly she froze with amazement, her facial expression changed sharply, as if something had struck her so much that for a moment it knocked her out of her sorrowful thoughts. The universe clumsily glanced at the princess. Maybe it just seemed to him, but he felt that their gazes met. The spirit of the wind approached the edge, leaned forward and squinted, intently looking into the crowd. She could not believe her own eyes, maybe it only seemed so to her. The boy cautiously looked around, trying to understand what exactly the girl was looking at. And as soon as he realized that she was looking directly at him, warmth filled his heart and thoughts. He could not resist and smiled. Though a bit awkwardly, he raised his hand and lightly waved to her. Suddenly, a sharp gust of wind rose. It swept away the people standing in the square. The hero even flipped in the air. It seemed that something was rushing quickly toward the universe, breaking everything in its path with powerful gusts of wind. It was the princess herself. She was running with all her might, as if she could pass through the air, noticing nothing in her way. And while people froze in amazement, not understanding at all what was happening, the universe was horrified. The princess, the spirit of the wind, was rushing straight toward him, and even his cloak did not help him blend with the crowd and hide from foreign eyes. Trembling tears appeared on the delicate cheeks of the girl and slowly rolled down, leaving wet traces behind. But as soon as they reached her chin, they were immediately caught by a strong wind that easily blew them away. The girl, on whose cheeks a gentle and light blush barely flickered, had almost reached her dreamed goal. The surprised boy, not understanding at all what was happening, spread his arms to catch the princess. She was literally just 1 meter away from him. She jumped into the young man's arms with great joy and enthusiasm, unexpectedly knocking him off his feet and leaving him barely standing. Typhon spun joyfully and suddenly knocked down the people standing nearby with powerful, stormy gusts of wind. They slapped around like an echo, conveying a sense of the power and grandeur of the element. She froze, still sobbing, and asked if it was really him. Was he alive at all? The young man, stunned by her words, looked at her with confusion and did not understand at all where she got such thoughts and assumptions. However, the spirit of the wind explained that the hero told her, during the campaign, the universe disappeared. For now, the future fiancé of the princess himself lay on the ceremonial square, in complete shock from everything that had happened. Typhon tearfully confessed, if the universe was really alive, then there was no point in marrying her. Her heart was torn by feelings it would not let her calm down, and the wind around her only raged, as if reflecting her inner state. The young man noticed this too. Strong and powerful gusts of wind easily swept away everything in their path, both light decorations, bushes, and even guards. While everyone around looked at each other in confusion and could not understand what was happening, the princess carefully took the universe by the hand and said that all this was not so important. Then, raising her hands, she looked him in the eyes with hope and asked if he wanted to run away with her, to leave all this behind and embark on an incredible adventure full of freedom and new opportunities. The spirit of the wind did not wait for an answer. She, full of determination and stubbornness, grabbed the young man and pulled him aside. There was no time to think. Behind them, the guards were already rushing, ready to catch them. Typhon, full of determination, picked up Universe in her arms and rushed away from the place of her wedding. Universe, stunned by what had happened, froze in embarrassment, tightly clutching the princess's shoulders, unable to comprehend what was going on. But still with a face twisted by misunderstanding, the guests, along with the savior of this world, sat down right on the floor and tried to understand what had just happened. The hero froze, looking at his fiancée, while petals continued to fly around him. Suddenly, rage overwhelmed him. His eyes widened and capillaries appeared like cracks. He clenched his jaw tightly and apparently was about to say something. Filled with deep despair and rage, he screamed madly at the entire universe, throwing insults. He waved his hand, addressing the guests in the square. He ordered them to grab the girl with the ears, and the spirits were simply stunned by such words. How could he allow himself such an insult? One of the spirits, unable to bear what was happening, burst into a loud and piercing scream, stubbornly calling the fugitive by name. Brabant looked around confusedly. He did not understand what they wanted from him in this situation, but the spirit firmly said that he simply could not ignore what the young man said about his fiancée. When Universe and Typhon ran out into the city, they were caught by the wedding carriage of Brabant and his fiancée. The boy froze, staring at him, and looked especially closely at the sign on the roof of this vehicle. But as soon as they approached the device that Typhon had found, Universe recognized his creation, a horse harnessed to a cart. It was the boy's friend, Trance. While Typhon climbed into the carriage, Universe petted his friend. The girl asked in surprise where he knew this horse from. Had they met before? The boy agreed and explained that this was the first magical device he had created. Trance had been on the hero's team from the very beginning all the way to the victory over the Demon King. The girl was surprised but noticed an engraving with a different name on the horse. On this magical horse was an engraving that indicated that this device was created by Hatsusan, the former head of the universe. The man got angry. How could this have happened? Of course, it was his own work, but it clearly did not bring him joy. Still, the girl pulled him away from petting the horse and said that he also had to get in quickly. The boys climbed into the carriage and continued their escape, trying to get as far away as possible from this place where danger threatened them. Despite the horse being magical, it behaved as if it were ordinary. Its hooves, as if safely unsuspecting anything, clattered on the ground and made the usual sound, the kind you expect from any other, less mystical chariot. Meanwhile, Universe was turning this over in his mind. He was surprised that the horse still hadn't spoken, but probably they just removed its voice module. The man promised his friend that he would definitely fix everything and erase this terrible engraving. Already out of breath, the knights were galloping at full speed. They were literally holding on to the very tail of the carriage in which the princess and Universe were sitting. When the guards began to surround the carriage, Typhon noticed this and called the boy. But it seemed he did not need an explanation, immediately saw the sad state of their affairs himself. The girl, clearly upset and disappointed, could not hold back her emotions. Tears already welled up in her eyes, and she exclaimed that with such a rapid development of events, they would probably be able to catch up very soon. The boy did not understand how this could have happened. Trans were made from the best parts that the universe had, so the speed should have been much higher. Suddenly he glanced at the girl who was looking ahead and confusedly could not comprehend. Suddenly he realized, trance works thanks to the powers of the earth spirits, and since Typhon is the spirit of the wind, it simply won't work fully because wind and earth are opposite elements. The girl replied to the universe that she understood everything, but there was no time to think and hesitate for long. One of the guards in the horse-drawn carriage had almost caught up to the princess's level. Typhon noticed this and sent a mighty gust of wind. It was so strong that it could be compared to a suction funnel. Everything in its path was swept away. Apparently, this guardian had no chance to escape the inevitable fate. His cart overturned and he screamed in surprise. The girl threw the reins to the boy. Fortunately, he caught them skillfully. But the young man did not even think of driving the horse from the cart, as most would have done in his position. Instead, he quickly jumped straight onto the horse's back. Universe pressed against the horse, praising it for the work done, and then turned to the spirits of the earth living inside it. He asked them to gather and do what he commanded. Suddenly, as if a voice came from the very depths of the horse, muffled and mysterious words sounded and rolled out into the surrounding world. These were the spirits of the earth. Hearing a familiar voice, they decided to respond. Little creatures, which can rather be compared to dwarf gnomes, joyfully jumped out to meet, and with incredible energy, showed all their inexhaustible joy at meeting their dear and beloved friend. They climbed down and climbed onto the horse's back with deliberate ease and without much effort, yet did not miss the chance to complain to the universe about how tired and exhausted they were, because this self-proclaimed hero constantly saddled them. The spirits of the earth were filled with motivation and determination only for the sake of meeting their master. They decided that they had to show him what they were really capable of, and then disappeared. Suddenly, the horse started galloping twice as fast, as if it were a completely different animal. The cart it was pulling raised clouds of dust and cut through the air with gusts of wind, sweeping away everything in its path. Typhon, holding onto the chair, could not sit still. Her hands twitched, and she tried to shout loudly and excitedly into the sky that they were flying too fast. Suddenly ahead in the wagons, several guards appeared. They tried to block the road and did not let the two boys pass, but the magical horse did not doubt its strength and continued to tear forward wildly. With one blow, he knocked down the entire squad along with soldiers, horses, and carts with such force that they flew several meters in the air before crashing to the ground with a rumble. Because of such incredible power, the chariot along with Typhon was thrown into the air, and even the universe itself, who at that moment was sitting on the horse, was lifted above the ground. They landed on the ground and moved forward just as quickly. The princess and the boy barely held their places, clinging tightly to everything they could. Typhon, full of joy and delight, screamed with happiness and waved both hands in the air, passionately pouring out her emotions. She enthusiastically told how magnificent and incredible it was, urging the horse to gallop even faster. She accidentally pressed a button and did not even notice that she had activated some mechanism. A bright inscription about Princess and Braben's wedding rose higher, and from the pipe behind it, something burst. A loud bang echoed and spread throughout the neighborhood. These were wonderful flower petals. They gently showered Typhon and Universe, enveloping them in an enchanting mood. At such a moment, they could not help but raise their heads, marveling at the incredible spectacle before them. But that was not all. From the compartment behind their chariot fell beautiful devices tied with ribbons. They hit the ground and produced a loud, pleasant melodic chime. From the outside, it looked incredibly strange. Typhon, the spirit of the wind, sat in the coachman's seat of the wedding carriage. Universe was positioned on the horse, and the carriage itself, surrounded by flower petals and wrapped in melodious music, dashed forward. Passers-by on the street began to notice this incredibly impressive, spectacular performance unfolding right before their eyes. Even those who initially paid no attention later turned around. They were drawn by the melody reaching them. They stayed in their places, not daring to approach, and discussed what was before them. It immediately became clear. This was the wedding carriage of the hero and the ghost princess, but they were even more struck by the fact that it was not the hero sitting on the horse, but some young man. The pair flew past the street where people had stopped and stood gawking, examining this amazing spectacular stunt. But Typhon did not care. She laughed happily like a little child, and the whole situation seemed incredibly funny to her. The people were punished even for curiosity, not intentionally, but because of the carriage rushing at high speed. It was chased by strong gusts of wind that literally knocked them off their feet. iPhone continued to sincerely rejoice at that moment, filling the space around her with positivity and light, and Universe in response only slightly smiled at her. It was clear that he was pleased to see her happiness. Suddenly, the spirits of the earth began to correct something in the wedding sign, the one that stood in a beautiful, carved frame. Universe noticed this and watched with surprise what exactly these spirits had in mind. Satisfied with their work, the spirits of the earth showed it to Universe, and from then on the sign bore an inscription. It was the love carriage of the Universe and his friends. The spirit with a majestic posture confidently stood face to face with Bravin, and full of determination, demanded explanations from him for the harsh and unacceptable words he had said earlier. He even repeated the offensive phrase that the hero had said to their princess, as if maliciously questioning whether he had misheard. His words sounded as if he could not believe that such a thing had even happened. He looked sternly at Bravin and reprimanded him. He said he would not allow the princess, the spirit of the wind, to be called that way, even despite such a great hero as he was. It was simply unacceptable. The hero grimaced with obvious displeasure and clicked his tongue, showing how much it annoyed him. He categorically disliked such remarks made about him and felt that everything happening was inappropriate. He did not consider these spirits to be people, much less did he respect them. He turned around and as he was leaving said, "Now we need to think not about this, but about how to capture this beast and all of this as soon as possible." But the spirit of the wind did not calm down. It asked again who they needed to catch if it was not the Universe. Braben's face clearly showed displeasure that this guy was not going to back down. Later he added, "Didn't the hero himself say that the Universe is dead?" The young man froze. He didn't even turn to the spirit, just silently listened. He turned halfway around and, showing complete disrespect, decided to parody the spirit. He muttered something, blinking, but the boy didn't care. He had already rushed to the other spirits and declared that he was glad to see the Universe. Braben put his hands on his hips, arrogantly raised his head, and asked why they were discussing all kinds of non-humans. In the hero's opinion, all the disgusting people in this world are called the Universe. And this name is the most disgusting. The spirits instantly turned to Braben as if on command. Their eyes showed mixed feelings, embarrassment, which almost struck directly with their gaze, and furious anger that gave them a terrifying appearance. They rushed at the hero, asking who else here was disgusting, and how he dared to insult their good friend. The boy clearly did not expect such a reaction. He awkwardly raised his hands as if to justify himself and tried to find words to save the situation. Spirit of the Wind, full of rage and determination, growled. Typhon agreed to marry Braben only because supposedly it was the will of the Universe and he died in the campaign, and now it turns out they relied on all this in vain. He promised that they would conduct a thorough investigation, and from now on they would never trust the hero again. Braben grimaced with anger and did not understand why they even picked on this Universe. The spirits left the square and assured, if the Universe is really alive, the hero must prepare for the worst. Braben remained alone watching them go with surprise. Some time later, Typhon and his companion broke away from the chase, entered the forest. The man stood bent over to rest, while the girl cheerfully jumped out of the carriage. The spirits of the earth burst into tears. They were incredibly happy to finally meet their lord alive, because, like everyone else, they thought he was dead. Universe squeezed one of the spirits on the head and thanked him for the help. Typhon was touched by such a sight and she also smiled contentedly. And the girl suspiciously watched how the young man caressed the spirits of the earth. It seemed she also wanted such touches from her friend, but she did not dare to say it. The man, as if sensing her request through her gaze, placed his hand on her head and thanked the spirit of the wind. The princess smiled and, unable to contain her great joy, contentedly twitched her unusual ears. The Universe smiled at this spectacle, but a little later he still asked her if she was sure that running away from the wedding was worth it. The girl puffed her cheeks and looked away, said she had already decided everything, and at the same time that she ran away not with someone, but with the Universe itself. If only the young man knew how, after the news of his disappearance, she could not find a place for herself. The princess lowered her head in shame, and a light blush covered her cheeks. She hesitated, trying to say that she loved the Universe, and although it was difficult to say, she still managed to pronounce it. As if not fully understanding what the girl was saying, the young man smiled at her and said that he loved her too. The girl's face instantly flushed red. She herself was extremely surprised by such a response, so she screamed. Then the spirits of the earth awkwardly looked at the boy as if asking for the same words. The universe quickly understood from the spirit's gaze what they wanted and confessed its love to them, and Typhon looked at the youth reproachfully. She blushed again and said that the universe is a fool, but could not hold back her emotions. Angry at the boy, she raised her fist to strike. The boy confusedly raised his hamstring a little to protect himself. But still, at the most inappropriate moment, the girl, without hesitation, suddenly grabbed him by the collar of his shirt and tilted her head toward him. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she sincerely admitted that she was very glad the universe remained alive. The young man with kind eyes allowed the beautiful princess to lean on him, feeling the warmth and trust of this momentary touch, and at the same time sincerely thanked her again. When Typhon calmed down and sat on the nearest stump, the universe asked what they would do next. It seemed the girl had no ideas either, so she asked what the boy himself wanted. He replied that he wants to fix Trans first, because it is in terrible condition right now. Universe ran his hand over the engraving on the horse and noted, to erase the inscription, one must reach the land of the water spirits, Concanto Ver. Because the engraving was made by powerful fire spirits for this, the strength of a water spirit at least as strong is needed. Typhon jumped up and down with joy and said she would go with the boy. He asked again if the girl was really sure she did not want to return to her homeland, and the princess assured him. Since the wind spirits are everywhere, her homeland will soon find out where she is. The girl cautiously approached the young man and asked again if he was ready to take her with him, to which he replied that he had no idea how he could refuse her wishes. The princess raised her fist to the sky with excitement and inspiration and exclaimed that everything was decided. They would start their adventure, and their first goal was the land of water spirits, Concantuara. The man in gloves was sorting through papers, and then, clearly dissatisfied with what he read, angrily crumpled the sheet as if it were to blame for all his problems. It was Brainbem. He laughed ominously and calmed himself with words that he would catch the universe and his bride, and then make them lick his boots. Maybe he went mad from such humiliation, or maybe he had always been like that. Typhon, leaning over, smiled gently, radiating kindness. She, addressing the spirits of the earth with gratitude and admiration, said that she was very glad to have the opportunity to meet them. It seemed that the very spirits of the earth were frightened by the unexpected appeal to them from the princess, the spirit of the wind. They trembled with fear, but still managed to utter one quiet, modest greeting. Universe calmed the guys down a bit. He turned to Typhon and explained, if that girl goes with him, it is better for her to get along with the other spirits regardless of their elements. After this, he extended his finger forward and, with a suspicious look, added that these would be his conditions. The girl, without any hesitation, assured him. She agreed, everything would be fine and they could already set off. But the universe asked her not to rush so much, and the girl herself looked at the boy with surprise, not understanding what was stopping them from moving this time. The young man said that Typhon first had to change clothes. In her wedding outfit, the princess would be too noticeable among the crowd and attract a lot of unnecessary attention. The girl agreed and immediately rushed to the carriage to change. She could no longer wait for the journey to begin, so there was no time to hesitate. The boy froze in amazement, listening to how much noise the girl made while changing. It was as if she was about to tear the whole carriage apart. Universe sighed and was about to figure out what else they needed to do before starting the journey, but Typhon distracted him. He loudly and clearly called his name. The princess had already managed to change and was showing her outfit to the universe, pleased with herself. She winked at the boy and smiled broadly as if already expecting a positive reaction. But the first thing that caught Universe's eye was the magical bracelet on the princess's arm. He wondered if it seemed to him that the girl was still wearing the bracelet he knew. Typhon began to examine her bracelet and said that, of course, she was wearing it because the universe himself had given it to her. The boy was delighted and smiled at the girl, but it looked like she was nervous and about to say something. The girl folded her hands in front of her and, showing her outfit, still asked the boy again how he liked her look. She really wanted to hear kind words from the person who was important to her. Then the young man noticed that the princess looked very beautiful and that this outfit suited her extraordinarily well, and this undoubtedly made the girl very happy. She smiled enthusiastically at the young man. The girl noted that she was very nervous because it was the first time she was wearing clothes in this style, but her face remained calm. From her voice it was clear. All this was confirmed by the world with the boy's words, because he really saw her in this look for the first time. The princess barely looked away, confessed a little embarrassed that during this trip she wanted the young man to see all possible traits and facets of her character. Then she suddenly waved her hand in front of the boy, pointed to the carriage, and asked if he also wanted to change clothes, because there was still a lot of different stuff inside. Visesvit pondered the princess's words. The couple entered the carriage, and it turned out that it was by no means ordinary. Visesvit immediately made it clear. Very strong magic was definitely involved here. Inside was a whole huge room. He looked around in surprise. He saw not just one room, but an entire palace. Visesvit did not understand why the hero needed so many rooms, as if he wanted to spend a honeymoon immediately with 8 princesses, but the girl standing by the door shouted to the boy. She opened the door. Inside was a spacious bedroom. Typhon gathered her thoughts together, confidently approached the wardrobe and opened it. It was packed to the brim, full of various junk. The wardrobe in the room was stuffed to the brim, with numerous and very expensive things, such that attracted attention with their grandeur and price. Spirit of the Wind, full of joy and zeal, with a bright sparkle in her eyes, asked the boy what he thought about these clothes. But the young man clearly did not like them, so with an indifferent face he asked to stop everything at that. The couple went outside and began to discuss. Inside the carriage everything was fine, but outside it definitely needed intervention, maybe to board it up with planks. But where would they get those planks? But Visesvit had already found out that there were many trees around them, and Typhon noticed this and assured them the forest spirits would definitely share with them. The princess proudly struck her chest, showing confidence and determination, and then insistently demanded to give her this because the wind spirits get along with the forest spirits. She firmly grabbed a strong axe and with full confidence, filled with determination, quickly went to the nearest trees. She wanted to ask these majestic trees for help. But something seemed to have gone wrong. After a short conversation with the forest spirits, Typhon, sadly clutching the axe, walked on foot to Visesvit. She lowered her head to the ground and lost all her enthusiasm. Typhon approached the boy and said that they would not succeed, the spirits would suffer, so they needed to abandon this idea. The girl's disappointment knew no bounds. Universe passed behind the girl and himself headed towards the trees, having a firm intention to find a way to negotiate. After all, maybe he would succeed, and that meant it was worth trying. The young man stopped in front of the nearest tree and looked at it carefully, while a light breeze stirred the leaves of the surrounding trees. He smiled, raising his gaze to the top of the tree, which spread its branches upward, and respectfully greeted the forest spirits, expecting them to appear and respond to him with their blessing. Voices came from inside the tree. The spirits were conversing among themselves, and one could think it was Mr. Universe himself. The man asked how they knew him. To this, the spirits assured, "In this country, there is no tree that does not know him. All the trees are connected by a root system, and this is how they pass important information to each other. This is how one of the forest spirits who appeared on the tree explained it." Universe confidently voiced his demand. He flinched from discomfort and said that he needed to chop firewood, but did not know how to do it without offending the spirits. The forest spirit joyfully spread its branches, resembling arms, and surprised declared, "Universe is truly as they say about him. Most would not even ask for permission, but simply on a whim would fell the trees." The man thought maybe this is because most ordinary people do not see these spirits, and Typhon is not as outstanding a spirit as Universe claims. The forest spirit added that he is ready to convey the words of all those whom people use. They say, like a tree, this tree is strong and resilient, therefore they are happy to help people for so long and allow themselves to be used. They like to serve people. The axe with a sharp blade and perfect balance sharply bit into the hard wood cleanly, quickly, and with unexpected ease, as if it were made of paper, and without any difficulties. Placing the log on the stump, the boys began to chop it. Universe firmly held the piece of wood, and Typhon boldly swung with admiration to deliver a strong blow with the axe. After that, the boys, together with the earth spirits, restored the carriage, nailing the obtained boards to the base of the carriage. When the work was finished, everyone was beaming and greeting each other with high fives. They were finally truly donen proud of what they had accomplished. The universe said what was in everyone's thoughts. He stated that the work is wonderful. She twitched with delight again, raising her fist. It seemed she was the happiest of all, although perhaps it was only because she was more emotional than the other spirits and even the universe itself. The boy noticed the shackles attached to the wooden post at the corner of the carriage and asked Typhon in surprise what it was. The girl raised her head. Her appearance showed that this thing caused her only negative emotions and even disgust. She explained to her companion that when the spirit who became a servant made a mistake, they would attach him with this device, a chainsaw, that he would realize his guilt and repent. Braven was beside himself with such a wonderful idea. The young man sternly declared that it was simply terrible. The hero could not even imagine such a thing. Meanwhile, Typhon listened carefully to what the boy thought about it. She smiled happily. It seemed that this was exactly what she was waiting for from her companion, but the universe could not understand why the girl was laughing at his words. Did he say something wrong? And the princess explained that in this world people generally see spirits as a lower class, just trash, but she was very glad that the universe was not like that. She smiled warmly, looking at the young man. That guy added that he considers any life valuable and important regardless of which class it belongs to. The girl added that the boy also treats the forest spirits with respect. It seems she sincerely admired him and was devoted to the universe for how kind and unique he is. Spirit of the Wind gave the universe its most sincere and most beautiful smile, and expressed gratitude for valuing every spirit it met along the way. The girl's words touched the boy, and her smile made him look away a little awkwardly. He awkwardly turned around, looked away, and suggested to the girl that they should set off already. She agreed with a radiant smile and enthusiastically asked Trans to go ahead. If this magical horse were in the best condition, the journey wouldn't take even a day, but now the boys will have to travel at least 3 days because of what was done to the horse while it was separated from the universe. Moreover, he said that at most they would need 3 days if nothing happens on the way, but already near the carriage stood someone in armor. These were knights whom Bravin sent for his fiancée and former comrade. The soldiers quickly reported to their commanders where the carriage was heading. Typhon felt that something was wrong and turned to the universe with her worries, but that boy also managed to notice it. When there was very little left to the border, the fugitives' crew was surrounded by the kingdom knights ready to prevent them from crossing the border. Typhon and Universe realized now they would have to break through by force again because they simply could neither retreat nor bypass the enemies. The Universe returned to his horse and asked for help in this situation. He also appealed to the spirits of the earth and said that he was counting on them too. They immediately sprang into action and enthusiastically shouted that they would definitely help. The chariot accelerated again, and the boys rushed forward. The bright sun shone right behind, and the knights in horse-drawn carriages were already relentlessly approaching. When the guards had already moved a few meters away from the carriage, Typhon and Universe decisively leaned forward preparing for the collision. They thunderously destroyed the obstacle in their path, and as soon as they broke through, the princess boldly climbed onto the roof, throwing several powerful gusts of wind after them to give them a bit more advantage. Sitting in her seat, the girl praised the universe and encouraged Trans, urging him to rush forward even faster. But the young man noticed something ahead and stubbornly stared into the distance. At the very border of the state appeared some kind of wall. It completely blocked the exit and stretched further with stones and hills, such as are characteristic of this rocky region. But it was not just a wall but spears, sharp and tightly bound together. They were arranged so that if you tried to crash into them, you could injure the horse. Typhon was clearly nervous. She spoke anxiously and insistently that, unfortunately, Trans would no longer be able to help them here. Then a brilliant idea flashed in the young man's mind. He turned to the spirit of the wind and asked her to use her powers to solve this problem. He shouted at full volume at such speed, it was hard to make out exactly what he was saying. That guy suggested using the power of the wind to lift the carriage into the air. The girl, frozen in surprise and at the same time confused in her own thoughts, quietly muttered that she probably would not be able to handle it. But the universe was not going to retreat and stubbornly held onto his opinion. He persistently urged the girl to at least just try and added that he was counting on her. Her face suddenly barely flared with the pleasant and warm words that the universe had spoken to her, and she replied that she would try to fulfill his request because she could not ignore his persistent appeals. The girl shouted loudly and pressed her palms to her mouth so that the sound would carry even further. She called the other wind spirits and asked them to lend her their power for a while. Small lights like magnets, hearing the girl's trembling call, began to gather together, swiftly flying from all sides and filling the space with amazing light. The princess carefully extended her palms forward, trying to catch the spirits who wanted to support her and help her on the difficult journey. Typhona resentfully shifted her gaze to the universe, as if she was about to burst into tears from what was happening. The girl, unable to hold back her emotions, cried out with bitterness and indignation that this would not be enough to handle such a complicated matter. But the boy was not going to give up. He decided maybe it would work if he gathered all the wind spirits together. After that, he raised his index finger and apparently thought about something clearly. The universe said, if any of the wind spirits want to have fun, let them fly to his finger. He used gathering one of the spirit hunter's skills, the ability to gather spirits on a raised finger. His desperate cry for help, which burst from the depths of his soul, echoed throughout the entire area. The offer coming from the universe reached several hundred meters, and the spirits finally paid attention to it. At first, they were silent and stood completely still, waiting for some signals or orders, but soon one of the spirits, unable to bear the uncertainty, asked his companions if the universe was calling them. Then dozens, maybe even hundreds of spirits flew to one place and jostled around the same question. Did the universe really call them? Typhon and her companion froze and raised their gaze, staring at those tiny lights slowly flying in response to his call. But in a moment, the wind spirits clung not only to the boy's finger, but also to the surprised princess. The young man did not expect this. He had no idea that so many spirits would respond to his call. After that, he immediately remembered why he was doing all this and ordered Typhon to continue. The girl, feeling a slight offense and despair, puffed out her cheeks as if trying to release her emotions, and although she did not want to, still agreed to the proposal. She turned to the spirits gathered around them, begging for help to lift the cart they were riding on because it was extremely necessary. The light and invisible wind spirits stretched out in different directions, flying around the carriage and creating a mysterious and magical cloud around it. These magical gusts filled the space, giving birth to a feeling of freedom and magic. The boys, full of determination and enthusiasm, were already preparing for flight. In a few moments, the wheels of the carriage lifted off the ground as if by magic, thanks to the incomprehensible and amazing power of the spirits dwelling in this mysterious world. And then the entire carriage, along with Trans, burst upward and took off. Now the obstacle no longer prevented them from leaving this kingdom. The soldiers chasing the fleeing boys raised their heads and froze in amazement. They clearly did not expect this, yet the carriage was already towering above their heads. While the boys flew over the barrier, the knights shouted at the top of their lungs, and it seemed with zeal. This was the first moment they saw the entire cart rise into the air. Typhon enjoyed the view, and the universe noted that, fortunately, they had already lost the pursuit. At that moment, the boy suddenly froze as if something flashed before his eyes, and this caused an internal shudder within him. He felt something unusual, which made him stop and start wondering if it was just a coincidence. Now it was clear that the universe had noticed it. Typhon carefully covered his hand with her palm. The young man did not understand why the princess had acted that way, so he asked her. The girl blushed and froze mid-step. She did not know how to justify herself. And suddenly a wonderful idea flashed in her head. Typhon said that it was dangerous here and that she did not want the universe to fall. When she said this, she blushed and looked away. The man smiled at her and said that then he was very grateful to her. And then he raised her hand, the very one he was already holding tightly in his. Typhona was incredibly happy and delighted, as if a child had finally received a long-awaited gift. She could not hold back a smile, and her face shone with joy. Universe looked proudly ahead, and Typhona only smiled. She liked this moment. It seemed that now she was not worried about the fact that they were flying, but that Universe was holding her hand. And although there are no roads in the sky, before the fugitives unfolded a boundless abyss of space, unknown possibilities, and freedom. Their carriage, like a magical ship, rushed through the heights, already detaching them from this kingdom and all its problems. At the same time, important events were taking place in the magnificent palace of the kingdom, capable of significantly influencing the future fate of the entire country. In one of the incredibly luxuriously decorated halls, where luxurious furniture and an atmosphere of grandeur hovered in the air, an important meeting was taking place dedicated to the serious and alarming topic of the typhoon kidnapping. The hero and at the same time, the next king of this place gritted his teeth and asked those present why they had not yet caught his fiancée and the kidnapper. Gatsuin, who was already the Minister of Magic, answered aloud. He said there was nothing to fear. Soldiers with the newest equipment, which the minister himself had developed, were standing at the border now. It was only a matter of waiting. Brighton sighed with relief, but neither anger nor anxiety disappeared from his face. Suddenly, a soldier burst into the office and announced. The carriage with princesses Typhon and Universe had broken through the border, and now the fugitives were far beyond the kingdom. Gatsuin jumped up, his face twisted from the news, and he slammed his palm on the table. He could not hold back his emotions. He asked how this could have happened at all. The knight awkwardly explained. Their carriage simply flew across the sky, bypassing exactly that new equipment and all the soldiers. But the Minister of Magic did not believe him and said there was no need to lead him by the eyes, because carriages cannot fly. He asked if the knight had been enchanted to spout all sorts of nonsense and received a clear denial in response. Then the future king slammed his fist on the table and said, Gatsuin simply understands nothing. Breben immediately realized. Typhon lifted their carriage into the air using the power of the wind. Gatsuin immediately covered his mouth with his palm and, gathering his thoughts, could only utter one phrase, awkwardly babbling. It sounded like understanding, although the minister himself clearly understood very little. He, pressing his hand to his heart, declared that, as everyone knows, the magical horse harness to that carriage was made by the minister himself. And then Breben said, Gatsua is completely hopeless. He just let them go and asked what he was going to do now. After an awkward pause, the Minister of Magic honestly admitted that he did not mean anything like that and just wanted to remind how wonderful the horse was. Breben's face twisted in confusion. But he laughed out loud and declared that he was actually crazy about the zombie search operation. Gatsun suggested scattering their portraits all over the world through postcards. Then everyone would start hunting for the head of universe, whether he is alive or not, and Braven would only have to wait and take what he wanted. Reunion with Typhon. The future king hit the table again. This scared Gotsuin, who was already preparing to grab him for his bad idea. Yet Braven praised the minister and, smiling broadly, enthusiastically noted that this idea was simply wonderful. Gatsuin sighed with relief. He so wanted approval and support from Bribin that he was terribly nervous when he dared to lay out his ideas. They had already started preparing wanted posters, and Brabant thought he would never be so disgraced again as he was then at the moment when Princess Typhon fled with that universe. He crossed his arms and thought that everything would be settled quickly. However, enjoying himself in the work he had done, he involuntarily laughed, though his smile was rather evil. The very next day, the streets were teeming with people who were hastily going about their business. Raven was riding down one of these streets in a carriage, already irritably hurrying to see how the townspeople would react to the announcement about the search for the kidnapper of Typhon's bride. The residents looked at the announcement with interest, but something was wrong. Next to the poster invented by Gotswan, there was another one hanging. The residents looked at the two posters with surprise. One said they were searching for Typhon in the universe, and the other said they were looking for the evil kidnapper of the princess who was taken right from the wedding. Even the pictures were completely different. The poster not created by Bray Ban and his ministers showed a smiling Typhon. She was happily standing next to a friend. The future king froze in horror. He did not expect this at all. Brevin considered it nonsense, saw that it seemed like they were mocking him, argued about what was true, and the newspaper authors probably hadn't decided themselves. The men were talking among themselves, guessing what was true. And it turns out they concluded that the princess was not kidnapped at all. Probably she just left with a certain universe. The hero barely restrained himself from such words, but he was overwhelmed with rage. But the men did not stop. They said how shameful it was when your bride is taken away, and in their opinion, Braven was a clear nobody since he couldn't even keep his own bride. The residents burst into loud laughter, repeating that even they would be better than him, and at least the girls standing nearby exchanged glances, and the women standing close by couldn't hold back and also burst into laughter. The hero gasped in horror. How dare they despise him like that, calling him weak? The man returned to the palace, and as if a dam had burst, in a frenzy of anger, abruptly opened the door to the office, loudly shouting Gatswin. But there, waiting for him not his minister, but a crowd of spirits who were on the side of Typhon and the universe. When they noticed Bryven entering, they immediately demanded explanations from him. The spirits held posters exactly the same as those hanging in the square. They surrounded the hero and declared that now they understood how well he understood everything. From the very beginning, he knew that their friend universe was alive. And they also asked how to read the inscription on the announcement, which said, "Find out if he is alive or not." Of course, they did not calm down. It turned out that Brabant was not a hero, but an ordinary liar. So what was the portrait of Princess Typhon worth, made to order by this guy? The spiritual king will definitely be furious. This young man has no conscience at all. Then their alliance with Typhon will simply collapse, and it is interesting what Braven will do. Filled with rage and uncontrollable anger, Brabant pointed at the spirits and insulted them, saying that they should not make a mountain out of a molehill and break the alliance. After that, he himself gave in to emotions. He spread his arms to the sides and declared that the universe was simply shameless, then laughed loudly. The hero was no longer in control of himself. He declared that if he wanted, he could easily wipe out all the spirit country in an instant, then added that he would easily put them all in one mass grave. Hearing this, the offended defenders of Princess Typhon silently just left the room, leaving the worthless young man alone. He sighed with relief and rolled his eyes. It occurred to him that it would have been better to do this from the very beginning. Then he would have spared himself from pointless conversations. There he set off, leading through the corridors of the castle, all the way to the distant door. Upon entering, he immediately found himself in a dark study. In the middle stood a man wearing a crown. He said he had just received a letter from the otherworld. It stated that their alliance was broken. The man did not expect such decisiveness and froze in place when the king demanded that he explain the situation. Brabant tried to justify himself and explained that this was the price for the audacity of their ministers and for the faults of all the spirits. But the stern, silent man did not let Breben finish. He interrupted him mid-word and stopped the insolent youth with a single word. He stood there like a little boy who had been harshly punished for some prank, looking at his father with complete confusion, unable to understand why he was so severely reprimanded. The king said that now, since the Lord of Demons was defeated, all the countries of the world recognized their power. It remained only to force the state spirits to obey them, and the empire that did not seize the chance and rule the world would become foolish. It was unacceptable to miss such an opportunity. The king announced that he was also breaking the engagement with the spirit's daughter. Breben looked at his father in shock, searching for the right words to calm him. The king, clenching his fist, declared that if his heir did not agree with this, he must immediately set out to restore the alliance and expel his worthless child from the court. Breben found himself just outside his father's study, and at that very moment the heavy door, as if acting as a guard, slammed shut behind him, leaving him confused and alone. His face twitched with surprise and disappointment. He did not understand why his father had simply called him worthless and miserable. The hero was surrounded by spirits looking down at him. Their gazes boiled with contempt. It seemed they did not want to notice him at all, as if his presence was something incredibly undesirable and disgusting to them. The man humbly bowed with his head and his whole body, demonstrating respect to the people standing ahead. It was also a sign of deep repentance and sincere apology. He forcefully said, "I am very sorry," and offered the most sincere apologies for his hasty and rude words. Although he himself was filled with rage and despair, pressing his lips so hard it hurt to keep his emotions from spilling out, he thought of only one thing. He could not allow the miserable universe to take away from him Princess Typhon, whom he so desperately needed. The spirits only smiled indulgently. One of them stepped forward, and on behalf of all declared that they all wanted to hear a genuine apology. The hero raised his head, unable to hold back his anger, and just as he realized it was inappropriate, he instantly twisted his face into an awkward, crooked smile. He proudly stated that they could not demand sincere apologies from him when they themselves did not even bow their heads. They asked for sincerity, but did not show even a drop of respect themselves. The spirits clearly did not like this statement, so they immediately began advising how to strip him of his heroic title, and they also said he must apologize not only to them. It was already hard for the hero to restrain himself. Veins appeared on his face, and he continued biting his lips. In his mind, he asked them whether they really saw nothing in him but trash, but he did not dare to say it aloud. With trembling hands, he touched the floor and changed his posture for the proper apologies that the spirit leaders expected. The young man who had fallen face down on the floor declared he swore to return the universe to his homeland. He sincerely apologized and asked not to break the alliance. Again, the chief among the spirits noted that Braben had twisted everything. He was supposed to apologize not to them, but to the universe and Princess Typhon. The order to apologize from both culprits of his miserable state angered the hero even more. He raised his head and said that he would definitely apologize to them as soon as he returned to his homeland, because if he apologized now, they still would not hear him, so it would all be in vain. One of the spirits said that at this time, forgiveness is achieved just as well as the way to convey his words to their ears. But above all, they themselves wanted to be sure that every word of the hero was spoken sincerely. Clenching his teeth in a fit of rage, Braben thought that they were all just mocking him. How could he apologize to such a rabble? It was a completely unacceptable humiliation for him. He calmed himself by thinking that they were not here, and that it was impossible to somehow convey his words to them. Then he squeezed out the question that gnawed at him the most. If he apologized, would the spirits keep the alliance? And the ministers who stood proudly before him assured him, unlike him, they always kept their word. Bent over, restraining his anger, the young man squeezed through his teeth. He was wrong and would no longer make Typhon do anything against her will. If she made a mistake, he would not blame her, and humbly asking, he asked to return. The spirits froze at this. They were struck by new details of the relationship between the princess and Braben, about which they did not yet know everything. The man realized he had said too much, and nervously bit his lip red. Burning liquid immediately poured from there, but the hero did not even notice. He continued his speech. From his lips came the demand to return the order, and he explained that he had treated it incorrectly and called again to work. And for greater effect, he added, he would free Gotsuan and make him a minister. The hero was clearly terribly nervous. This was the first emotional appeal with an apology in his life. From restrained anger, capillaries burst in his eyes, and the same red streaks immediately appeared from them. While the confused hero still held a smile, the spirits crowded around the strange device and whispered that it turned out too well. In despair, Braven pointed to this device and asked what it was, and the spirit answered him, it is a magical device that will transmit everything said directly into space. The spirit also added, unlike photographs, this instrument is perfect for capturing movements and sound. Meanwhile, on the device itself, Braben's recorded apology speech was already playing. The spirits were already leaving, and the hero still sat alone on the floor in complete stupor from what had happened. They were briskly discussing asking a journalist acquaintance to send this broadcast to all countries. Suddenly, the young man jumped out of his place, and like a wild animal, making strange sounds and growling, rushed to chase the spirits who were fleeing in terror. He grabbed the minister who was holding a magical device and, hearing the question of what he was going to do, replied, he would destroy it, because if something like that got out, his reputation would be ruined. Other spirits looked disdainfully at the boy. They took the device and were surprised that even in such a state, he dared to behave like that, to which Braben despairingly declared that they had simply been set up. The spirits left the miserable hero and assured him that their alliance was restored, but the hero did not calm down and sincerely begged them to remove this shameful video, apologizing. When the spirits turned around and left, he fell flat on his back like a small child. Brabant twitched, jerked his arms and legs, rolled on the floor, and cried whimsically that this must be stopped, and everything immediately cleaned up. Meanwhile, the carriage with the fugitives was already rolling through the territory of the kingdom of Vasvampu, and Typhon joyfully exclaimed that she saw a pond ahead. The girl was jumping up and down, unable to contain her emotions, and showing her companion what she had noticed. She, like a little child, was gazing enchantedly at the sparkling lake ahead, while Universe smiled at such a touching sight. He explained that Wasvamp is known for its many beautiful ponds and lakes. There is the largest lake in the world, so huge that it looks more like a sea. The girl, hearing about this, became even happier and declared that she definitely wanted to see this amazing spectacle. The universe thought it over and realized, indeed, for Typhon is the princess of the wind spirits, she has never even been to other countries. The young man said that although it is a bit out of the way, they will definitely stop to take a look. The princess smiled broadly, thanked the universe, and added that she is also grateful to Trance, who is driving them. When they reached the place, they saw a huge poster that attracted the attention of tourists, and behind it was a huge lake with a luxurious, picturesque view. Typhon decisively moved towards it. On the shore of the lake, people were dancing and having fun. Some were drinking cocktails, and others were preparing a delicious dinner for themselves. Loud laughter and music echoed across the entire beach. The girl felt surprised at how cool it was here. People in swimsuits passed by them, and right in front of them stretched a path to the lake. But the universe did not share such joy and wanted to quickly escape from this place, but for Typhina's sake, it remained silent. Full of determination and inspiration, the princess extended her hand to the boy and hurriedly invited him to go further and properly enjoy the evening just like all the other people who came here. When the guys were already entering the thick of the fun, a threatening man stopped them and called to them from behind. The guys froze, stopped, and turned around to look him in the face. The man in a hat and glasses sternly took a drag from his cigar and said that these two should not rush for no let them stay where they are. It was Locuet who controlled the lake. He raised 2 fingers and explained, the entrance costs 10,000 ENDA per person. That also includes a barbecue set and other things. Then he demanded 20,000 ENDA from the 2 people. Universe and Typhon froze in amazement. Why was it so expensive? The man tried to ask. Locuet smiled and explained that this is the price for heroes. The universe froze because he remembered. These are the prices for all goods and services related to Hero SN. They are just insanely expensive. The young man was running through the cost of posters and signs, with Braben's face in his head. The man asked, isn't the universe a child or what? Doesn't he have 20,000 ENDA? And when he heard silence in response, he sighed heavily. He offered another option which infuriated the couple. Lokvat said he would reduce the price by half if they came with a girl in a swimsuit, and if she was also beautiful and stylishly dressed, he was ready to give a free gift. Princess Typhon seemed to already have a plan. Her eyes flashed, and she, full of determination, addressed the universe. The girl asked him to wait a bit and quickly ran to the carriage in which the 2 of them had arrived. Loquat and Universe stood and waited, and after a few moments the princess appeared before them, apologizing for the long wait. She quietly praised her outfit. Now it was clear. The girl had simply run out to change into a swimsuit. The lake manager was delighted by this sight, and her companion froze in amazement. The swimsuit perfectly emphasized her figure. Loquat, wiping tears from such a magnificent sight, raised both thumbs up and assured that it was simply incredible so the guys could go and have fun. Typhon, pleased with herself, walked proudly, humming a melody to herself, while the young man stretched behind and looked around. When they came out onto the beach, all the men immediately stared at the beautiful Typhon, paying no attention to her companion. They surrounded her from all sides and bombarded her with questions, whether she was alone, where she came from, whether she wanted to relax with them. One of the guys even asked, saying he heard that spirits like to serve people. What does she like the most? And the girl broke free and ran headlong to hug Universe, who froze, not understanding anything. She said that he was the only person she served. He looked away and thought that was too harsh a statement. And then, with surprise and shock, he noticed how those guys immediately looked at him with displeasure and scattered along the beach. Typhon enthusiastically hugged Universe's arm. Pressing herself to him as tightly as possible, she was pleased with what she had told everyone, and the young man sighed with relief now they had one less problem. He suggested moving on, and the satisfied girl nodded and agreed with a smile. She put on a sweet expression and suggested to the boy, since they finally got here, they should take a walk and enjoy the scenery. The young man noticed out of the corner of his eye how the boys continued to discuss them, rudely pointing fingers, after which he finally agreed with the girl, and they moved forward with an even, calm pace. When they reached the shore of the lake, Typhon was joyfully and pleasantly impressed by what she saw. For the first time in her life, she saw such an incredibly beautiful, picturesque scene. The girl noticed that it was a bit cooler near the water, but still pleasant, and then universe told her not to press against him so tightly otherwise she might get dirty. The boy explained that he was wearing work clothes, he smelled of grease. And the princess was not embarrassed by this at all. She believes that everything is fine because this is obvious proof of how the universe diligently works with spirits. Then, pleased with herself, she decided it would be better to press even closer to her companion, who could only awkwardly call her by name. But suddenly their conversation was interrupted by a loud, rolling rumble of the girl's stomach. It clearly indicated that she was hungry. Typhon blushed with shame and looked away, but this boy reacted calmly. He noted that her stomach suggested they had eaten nothing since early morning. And then, since they were already here, he suggested trying barbecue. The girl agreed, and impatience flashed across her face to quickly swallow something tasty. The couple then reached the place, with tables designated for barbecue preparation. They took a set of ingredients amazon, which contained a bunch of different things. Typhon joyfully announced that she had already prepared everything, while the guy was getting the grill ready for barbecue. When the coals began to smolder, the guy noted that he had also prepared the grill for cooking food. Confidently, he arranged the food on the grill, and an incredible aroma of roasted meat spread throughout the area. It smelled so delicious that even people at neighboring tables stared for a moment, as if it were some cosmic mystery. Juicy meat, fish, and even shrimp were grilling on the grill, and their juices dripped onto the coals, burning and raising a wonderful aroma into the air. The group sitting next to the couple struggled with a terrible desire to try these dishes. They looked incredibly appetizing, yet no one dared to approach. They did not consider themselves beggars. The universe handed the prepared portion to Typhon and warned her not to burn herself because the dish was still very hot, so she had to eat carefully. The girl, anticipating the wonderful taste of the cooked food, thanked the guy. She took a small piece of meat on her fork. Steam was coming from it, so the dish was freshly prepared, and how well the meat was cooked was visible by the juice. It oozed and splashed right onto the floor. Typhon brought the piece of meat to her open mouth and tasted the food. From the very first bite, the girl was delighted. The warmth of the dish melted her cheeks and a light blush appeared on them. Typhon bit into the meat with her teeth and slowly savored the moment of pleasure from every swallow. Finishing her work, the girl said, her eyes shining with complete admiration, "It was very tasty." Saliva dripped from the corner of her mouth and stars seemed to flare around. Typhona jumped up to Universe, her eyes sparkling with joy, and said it was the first time in her life she had eaten such delicious food. The boy, embarrassed, replied that she was exaggerating. Universe smiled, gave the girl a new portion, and suggested she try some more. The girl was surprised by what was on the plate. Typhon brought a piece of seafood and said that these shrimp were so springy. Then she properly counted them, tasted them, and enthusiastically noted their tenderness. And finally, with a satisfied face, she said it was a real delicacy and greedily licked the tip of her fork. Other people on the beach watched the girl eat and also wanted to try. The universe noticed this and recorded it, deciding that others had too much fire, so they could not have cooked such delicious barbecue. The man continued grilling seafood, repeating to himself, they must be grilled in the heat of the coals, not over an open flame, but still, the most important thing was something else. The universe responded that thanks to the spirits of fire and forest, they had the best barbecue in the world, and thanked them for the joint work. The boy stepped aside, and the spirits of the forest and fire replied that they had to thank him. The spirit of fire continued to respond. She said that people thought they could light a fire themselves, and that she was tired of that ignorance. She asked the spirit of the forest if she was right. The spirit of the forest replied that she was right, and that it would be wonderful to have a barbecue again with Mr. Universe. Fire replied that she agreed, but without him no way. The man reasoned that by combining the powers of different spirits, one could enhance their abilities and gain new ones. Citing the example of the fire and forest spirits, they provided both warmth and tasty food. The universe thought, responding to what should be considered during combination. Some spirits tend to conflict with each other, and it is better not to force them to do something against their will, because you can ask them to cooperate. The man remembered how he asked the spirit for reconciliation, using the powers of the spirit master, thanks to which they were able to understand each other, understood each other among themselves, and became inseparable. The girl called the boy and asked him to open his mouth. The universe opened its jaws and the girl, smiling, speared the food with a fork and shoved it inside. Typhon said that since he had prepared everything, she should feed him and ask if it was tasty. The man, chewing, nodded to the girl in response. The man thought the taste was still not right, looking at the sky. The universe believed that moxon on this lake tastes like the best steak. The man looked around and saw a poster. On the poster was a man in a raincoat holding a fish in his hands. People stood nearby. Above the image itself, a list of scores for fish caught by weight, in first place 70 kilograms. The man decided that he was the one who took that photo. Typhon, holding a plate and a fork, called out to the universe, and the man responded. The universe smiled and said that now it would prepare a real Mogan for her. The girl stood up in a stupor and, looking at the boy, asked if this Mosen was not real. The universe replied that she was mistaken, this is reality, but there is something even better in this lake. The man standing next to the heroes mockingly asked if they wanted to catch fish, and if it would work. In response, he stated that one can die from a Mosen bite, and that he just wants to boast in front of his partner. The two proposed a bet to each other on how the universe would die. One bet it would drown, and the other that the boy would be bitten by that guy. The guys decided whoever wins the argument will get Typhon. Everyone agreed, and a few more joined. The girl looked at them angrily. The universe silently moved toward the lake. Approaching, he sat down by the water. The universe spoke, looked into the water, and said that they had not seen each other for a long time, so this was a greeting to the spirits. The man asked if he could split the mason again like last time. The water began to react to the boy's words. From the water emerged the outline of a round face. It was the spirit of the lake. He smiled at the boy in a friendly way. The spirit of the lake asked the universe, was it really him calling? And it turned out he was right. The spirit of the lake said that he had finally come. The boy looked at the spirit and smiled. The spirit of the lake said that he had just prepared a decent mason for the boy, but warned, the fish is dangerous, and the hero needs to stay away from the mason. The spirit concluded by saying that the boy only needs to snap his fingers and the mason will appear. The universe replied that he understood him. The man began to move away from the lake, and people from afar asked if he had given up. The universe snapped his fingers and looked satisfied. Bubbles suddenly began to appear in the water. The lake rumbled, and the water swirled in a circle, scattering around. Big fish jumped out of the water with splashes. The universe was not surprised, it calmly enjoyed the catch, and Typhon was pleasantly surprised and rejoiced at the new prey, while the other guys were impressed by the fish. A mason the size of a man and a half jumped onto the shore, splashing the hero. From behind came surprise and a question. Those behind started pointing fingers at that guy and wondered how he managed to pull out such a catch as if with a snap of his fingers, and they also criticized his strange fishing. The guy himself didn't even look at them, only mentally replied, "This fishing is thanks to the spirits." Typhon sincerely folded her arms on her chest and looked at the hero, praising him for such coolness. While the guy was pulling the fish by the tail, the girl nearby was jumping for joy. A crowd of young girls in swimsuits jumped out from behind and ran to meet the heroes. The girls surrounded the heroes and, approaching the young man, began to praise him, insisting that anyone who caught such a big mason cannot be a bad person and that they liked him. Typhon looked at the ladies with disgust and contempt for such behavior. The guys weighed the caught mason and were amazed hundreds of kilograms of fish. They said that only a true hero could pull out such a catch. The young men tried to bribe the fisherman and turned to the universe, praising him for such work, saying they never doubted him for a second. The young man understood. They want to bribe him with lies and looked at the guys with contempt. The guys joyfully and grimacingly suggested to the universe, now let him share with them. The guys grabbed the fish and the knife and began to pull the mason towards themselves, but Typhon, noticing this, shouted and ordered them to stop. The girl angrily and irritably pointed her finger at them and asked who gave them the right to eat this. Typhon frowned and shouted what misfortune the universe had brought her, pointing fingers at herself. One of the guys replied that the carcass was too big for two and asked why they wouldn't eat it all at once. The girl categorically refused. The girl angrily reminded the boys how they mocked the universe before the fish were divided and ordered them to remember their words. The boys looked at the girl, not understanding what was happening. The boys looked around guiltily so as not to cross paths with gay Typhon because they were ashamed. Immersed in thought, they knelt before the heroes and asked for forgiveness, promising it would not happen again. For the hero, the girl responded threateningly, saying she did not feel sincerity in their words, so she ordered them to apologize again. She said that heads must be lower and bows synchronized. The boys followed the girl's instructions. Typhon frowned and replied that he would not see the mason until he heard a perfect apology speech. The man smiled and laughed shyly. The girl raised her hands and called for them to apologize again. The universe watched from the side and wondered where Typhon learned to scold people like that. Now the poster depicted Universe and Typhon in the foreground, a large 100 kg Mason. Universe was preparing a horse-drawn carriage for the road. The protagonist called Tiffany let her go ahead. The girl nodded and agreed. Suddenly they were called and the girl turned around. Young men and women from the beach said goodbye to the heroes and thanked them for the Mason, saying that now they would pass the legend of Mr. Universe by word of mouth. The heroes got into the carriage and waved back in farewell to the others. The sun was already setting. Universe began to think that he only gives people fish skin. Typhon, with a disappointed face, added, saying that it was only because she was human and he did not love her. The man recalled how people ate fish skin with such pleasure. The boy said that the mason he raised broke all records, and he sent the remains to a special magical freezer. The girl raised her hands to the sky and joyfully replied that it was so cool and that she was happy for the first time. The universe looked down and smiled, replying that it was good that they stopped right here. The girl, looking at the hero, smiled back. Typhon rested her head on her shoulder and closed her eyes. The girl thanked the universe for everything, and they moved on. The man noted that they were being actively hunted, and if they stayed in the wagon too long, they might be suspected of having a stolen hero card. The girl was surprised by this information. Typhon looked at the boy and said, wherever she was safe with him. Without taking his eyes off the road, Universe replied that they needed to stop in the field. The boy thought and retracted his words, saying there was a village nearby he had passed it when he was in the squad fighting demons. Confirming what he said, the boy added that they would stop there, in the village of the famous, Idon. The girl joyfully raised her fist and said that this was exactly where they would go now. They were heading to the village of Aden. Among the houses of death lay a lonely path through the forest up into the mountains to a lonely well. A terrible sound came from the well. The city of Idon, people bustled in crowds between the houses, and near the houses stood statues and a poster with a boy who called himself a hero and a girl. Universe and Typhon walked through the city and stopped in surprise. The man asked if they had really reached the place they were heading to. The girl smiled and asked how many people were here. The couple looked at the statue and talked about it. The girl asked if it was a hero. The boy replied that it looked like he was a hero. The girl paused for a moment and made a sound of surprise as soon as she saw the statue with the boy's face and the heroic boot he was wearing. On the pedestal under the statue was written, Great Hero and Blockhead Universe. The girl asked if Universe was depicted under the heroic boot, to which the boy gave a doubtful agreement. Typhon was on edge, approached the boy, and said that it was terrible and that the universe was not like that at all. The boy, closing his eyes, tried to calm the girl. He said it was just a minor misunderstanding. Universe extended her finger forward and pointed, Go ahead. The girl puffed her cheeks angrily and turned away. A man with a bucket passed by the girl and accidentally bumped into her. The villager apologized, and the girl replied that nothing serious had happened. As he walked away, the boy muttered something about a well with water. The girl stared at the ground. In the village, there was a boy who considered himself a hero. The hero, boasting about himself, declared that it was time for such a wonderful and handsome hero to appear. Typhon noticed the hero and was horrified. He is here. The girl hid behind Universe. Universe looked at the crowd where the hero stood with annoyance. The man began to approach those people, addressing them. The people looked around. One of them, a man with a cane and a scarf on his head, remembered Universe. The man stepped back, and behind him stood Typhon. The old woman pointed with her stick at the boy and asked the people if they remembered the idiot. Universe. Universe stammered and said in confusion that it was him. The old woman smiled. With her mouth you could count the teeth on her fingers there, and replied that it really was him, saying he came without dust. The old woman's face twisted into a grimace of disgust, and she said that Universe had greatly angered the spirit Lady Aden, and now the story of the hero's deeds, who saved the village, had spread and began to attract people to him. Universe abruptly stammered, but still said that they would like to stay there for the night. The old woman sharply snapped at him for asking. The angry old woman said that Lady Aden had been in a bad mood lately, and that their well was about to dry up. She added, if they allow the criminal Universe to spend the night at such a time, the village will be destroyed. The old woman with the cane turned around and said that now she would arrange a meeting between the hero and Mrs. Aden, so that she would finally cheer up and start driving Universe away. The boy pondered what to do, because if she managed to arrange a date between the hero and Aden, a misunderstanding would arise. Typhon became interested in the situation from behind. The girl decided that this was probably not the hero she had thought of, and looked back at Universe. The hero shifted his gaze to the girl and began to show off before her. Typhon grabbed Universe's cloak and trembled with horror. Her hopes for another hero vanished instantly, and before her stood the very man she hated. Universe asked the old woman to meet with him. The old woman became even angrier and said that he had completely gone mad. The villagers turned to the old woman as their leader. The old woman was blown away by those words. She turned around and asked what they wanted. The people replied that Universe had helped them for the last time, and he was nothing like a hero. The hero approached the villagers, thoughtfully raised his hand to his chin. He said that if he gave the boy to Aden and allowed her to cook or bake him as she pleased, Universe might feel relief, the old woman thought. The hero, considering the thought, grimaced and asked if this was not the perfect victim. The hero added, after that he would throw Universe into the stable like a rag. The old woman approached Universe and said that he could spend the night with them, but first he had to meet Lady Aden. A group of people was climbing the mountain. A man with a lantern was walking ahead, behind him the hero. Two boys held on the edges and carried the village head. Universe and Typhon were walking last. The girl asked Universe if they would really come to her. The boy turned his head to Typhon, and the girl added that it seemed to her that those people were planning something evil. The man smiled at Typhon and told her not to say that because Eden is only a spirit, and partly they are here already because he did not manage to solve one confusion. The girl stared at the man with her mouth open in amazement. The old woman shone a lantern and said they had arrived. Before them stood a well with a small wooden annex like a little temple for some deity. Near the well towered statues and posters with a hero and a girl in his arms. Despite everything around, the well seemed gloomy, and sounds came from there. The people standing nearby were stunned by these sounds and froze in shock. The old woman pushed Universe in the back and ordered him to finally come to the well. Visesvit looked seriously into the well as if into a prophecy and fell silent. The man stepped forward. Typhon glanced at Visesvit and also became quiet. A loud rumble burst from the well and the Universe froze in shock. Frightened people looked at the well. Suddenly a black hand flew out of it, and then a head with long black hair appeared. Something crawled out of the well and licked itself. The girl hid her entire face with hair, and only one of her eyes was visible from the shadow. Her gaze burned with horror and rage. She reached out her hand to the people. As if some girl grimaced, opened her mouth and stretched out her hand. Her hair twitched in different directions, and her face froze with a gaze full of emptiness. The girl's Screamed's boys ran away from her. The girl with black hair just wanted a hero. She aimed at the boy. The boy looked back and screamed in horror. The girl attacked the hero and threw him over her shoulder. People turned around to look and ran in horror to call the hero. The young man lay below the girl, his face twisted with fear, and he was breaking into a scream. The girl held the hero with one hand and raised the other to strike. Something relentlessly struck the hero in the face. The man screamed and begged for help. The old woman, trembling with fear, asked Mrs. Aiden to stop because she was hitting the hero. She pointed with her finger at the couple and declared that the full universe was standing here. The lady stopped beating the hero and slowly began to reveal the name of the universe. The hero was already unconscious. Ms. Eden sharply turned around and smiled ominously as soon as she pronounced the boy's name. Universe and Typhon silently watch Odon. The spirit lady quickly runs up to the couple, and Typhon, frightened, grabs the boy by the shoulder. Mrs. Aiden's face suddenly changed to a sweet and joyful one. She raised her hands and addressed the universe, calling him a gentleman. Welcome back. The girl fell into the boy's arms and happily pressed against him. Typhon froze in stupor and gaped in confusion. The people behind Typhon stood silently shocked by what had happened. Returned to the past, the story about the hero and the universe itself was told like this. A group of heroes set out to the village to borrow the spirit power of the well in honor of the victory over Lord of Demons. The hero's servant Yugaverse poured poison into the well. The spirit of the well, Lady Aiden, went mad. But as soon as she saw the hero, her anger subsided. Only out of pure love did Lady Eden swear eternal loyalty to the hero. Turning to the present, the girl glared angrily at the boy and called his name. Miss Aiden lunged at Universe. The boy stood as if rooted to the spot, neither flinched nor retreated before the blow. Typhon clicked at the guy and rushed to help him, but in a moment her gaze changed. The girl watched as Mrs. Aiden hugged Universe and greeted him. Typhon looked at them and was amazed at what was happening. Lady Ida looked like a little girl. Her ears were like gills, and instead of long hair, she had a bob. She was dressed in a kimono with a bow on the back. She spoke about herself and about the fact that in the third person, she could not believe that they had met again and was very happy to meet him. The hero came to his senses and gave a hoarse hiccup as soon as he saw what was happening. Lady Ada said that she had not forgotten about the universe and thought about him every night. Typhon got angry because of what was happening behind, and in confusion asked how she dared to hug him. The villagers in the village head silently froze, looking with mixed surprise and uncertainty. The old woman shuddered, and in confusion asked if Lady Aiden did not hate the universe. Mrs. Odon turned her head and told the old woman that this was not true at all. On the contrary, she adored the universe. The old woman, with a worried expression, replied that the hero himself had told her so. Then Mrs. Odon declared, now she herself would tell how things really were. The hero's group 4 people stopped near the well. The hero loudly shouted into the well shaft, ordering the well spirit to appear because the hero had come to her. The well was silent and nothing happened. The hero's face flared with anger because he was being ignored. The girl with a scarf on her head turned to the hero named Braven and handed him a vial of poison. After that, Universe was the 5th in their team and carried the burden for them. The hero poured the poison into the well and turned to the universe, addressing him in a quiet voice with reproach for being late. The angry Mrs. Aiden climbed out of the well. She rushed to attack the hero while he defended himself and asked her to stop. She pushed Braven to the ground. He again asked her to stop. The universe was watching. He did not understand what was happening. Night fell. Lady Eden was poisoned. She curled up in a ball, pulled her knees up, and cried. Universe sat nearby. The girl said that if it continued like this, the poison would reach the wells in the village. The man with sadness on his face said that he deeply regretted the hero's actions and did not dare to ask her for forgiveness. He only asked for permission to do one thing. The girl asked what he was asking permission for. Universe raised his hands to the sky and called for the spirits to gather, then asked the girl if she agreed and if she would need his help. Lady Eden looked up and froze in anticipation. When the dark night came, many fireflies appeared. The light gathered around Mrs. Eden, and she said with surprise that these were the spirits of spring. These little spirits looked like tiny fairies. They healed Mrs. Eden from the poison, and she replied that the poison was cleansing. In Mrs. Eden's eyes, the universe looked like a prince who saved the princess, and everything around sparkled as if in a fairy tale. The man extended his hand to her and said that now everything was fine with her, and they needed to go. Miss Eden and Universe began to rise into the sky, holding hands, and looked at each other with a special gaze. The residents, hearing this story, were disappointed and said how the hero could do such a thing, adding that after this Mrs. Eden began to love a simple worker. The girl still held the boy by the hem of his clothes, turned to the people, and declared that she had told everything, asking why they did not believe her. Mrs. Eden grabbed her forehead and began to lift her bangs. Under the bangs on the girl's forehead was a mark. The hieroglyph meant good. The girl herself began to emit light from her small body. The residents began to cover their eyes with their hands, protecting themselves from the dazzling light. They said that the sign of Mrs. Eden, which shows the lady's power, had now reached the highest level 4. The girl rejoiced at their words and replied that she was now in a state of bliss. She was sincerely pleased to reunite with the university again. Lady Eden raised her hands to the sky and shouted that her power was overflowing. The villagers looked toward her raised palms and froze with their mouths agape. Suddenly, water splashed from the well behind the girl like a fountain. Passers-by who were on the street at that moment froze in surprise. Wells all over the city began to shimmer, the water overflowing them spilled out. People rejoiced for the hero who made Mrs. Eden happy again. One of the residents remarked, maybe her mood improved because the carefree hero was beaten. At that moment, Braven quietly tried to escape. Lady Eden told the village head that she had to dispel a human mistake. She did not seem to adore the hero, but the universe. With a face full of confidence, the girl declared, when the universe is near, she will be filled with joy, and the well will never dry up. People bowed to Lady Eden, and the boy inside rejoiced. All misunderstandings were finally resolved. Suddenly, someone grabbed the universe by the hand. The man turned around to see who it was. Typhon was hugging Universe from behind, and blushing, puffed out her cheeks and turned away from him. The universe looked at the comrade with incomprehension and asked what was troubling her. The girl shuddered and answered. Typhon grabbed the boy by the edge of his clothing and, looking down embarrassed, said that she had never been affected like that. The village head turned to the universe. She knelt down and said she sincerely apologized for her rudeness. The boy was embarrassed and replied confusedly that everything was fine. The old woman, smiling, said that the universe is their lord and hero who saved their village. She asked him to feel at home. The leader began to lead the boys, saying she would take them to the inn. The boy turned around and looked at Mrs. Eden, and the girl quietly sat on the well and watched Universe. Miss Ida said sadly that she could not leave the well. The boy smiled at her and replied that he would definitely visit her before leaving the village. Miss Eden gently smiled in response to the forgiveness from Universe. At the hotel entrance, a friendly girl in a kimono greeted the couple. While welcoming the guests, she asked them to have a good rest and warned that there was no one inside yet. The hotel was not yet open. The girl led the couple to the room and declared that she was the best in the whole house. Typhon immediately liked the room and walked on the floor, spinning around himself. The girl turned to the Hiroto, the universe in which they were best known for their hotel baths, both indoors and even outdoors, under the open sky. It was then that Typhon stepped onto the balcony and looked down. Typhon asked the girl about the open baths. The boy suggested going for a swim. Typhon gladly agreed to Universe's proposal. The open bath was lined with wood. The water in the pool was so warm that steam rose from it. The boy lay down in the bath next to the little spirits and babbled about how good it was there. Addressing the spirits, he said that today they did wonderfully. Meanwhile, the spirits splashed in the water. Universe heard a sound from behind and, interested, turned around. The man saw someone was coming towards him. A girl with her hair tied back and wearing a towel approached the bathhouse and smiled. The boy froze in surprise. Universe cursed and told Typhon that this was a men's bath. The girl replied that there was no one in the women's bath, so she would be lonely there. The girl sat down and asked if they could join because there was no one else there. The boy, confused, agreed to her proposal. Typhon slowly dipped his toes into the water. The girl fully submerged herself in the water and said how good it was there, as if all the fatigue was lifted by a hand. The boy, smiling, said that so much had happened today, and the girl agreed. Tiffin said she was terribly scared when she thought the hero was real because he did not look like him at all. The girl looked ahead and said that the hero's aura did not attract to the real one. The boy thought about it, then looked ahead again. Universe replied that he had heard how people and spirits see things differently. Typhon looked at the boy. The girl suddenly stood up and pointed ahead, saying that maybe the fake hero was hiding there. Under the bathhouse on a chair sat a beaten Breben, and the girl was on the ground next to him. The boy's face was swollen. The man nudged the girl with his foot, asking why she was taking so long, and ordered her to do her job faster. The girl humiliatingly and submissively obeyed the fake hero. Nearby people whispered that Mrs. Edane had beaten him so badly, and that everything they said was true about the hero. The fake hero sat while the girl wiped the dirt from his face. Suddenly, the girl was stopped. The tenant took the girl by the hand, said she shouldn't do that, and asked her to turn back. The girl wanted to say something to that boy but didn't. The beaten hero got angry and cursed, declaring how dare he even contradict him, because he is a hero. The boy stood before the false hero and contradicted him. How can they court a man who insults Mrs. Eden if the well might dry up again, just because she takes offense at them? Breben tore himself away from the spot, jumped up from behind the table, and roared that he would drive all their families out of the village because his parents were landowners. The boys walked on without looking back, but the girls still glanced around. The man swelled with anger and cursed the inhabitants of the well. Water from the well splashed out like a fountain and the hero flew up into the air, screaming. In fear, he said he would die from the cold and asked for help. Universe in Tafuna watched how the hero flies over the water and, ironically, said that the local babs here are nice and the landscapes are very interesting. The girl wiped her hand and said that she was incredibly lucky. She would not have to marry the hero and wash his back. Now she was very happy. The boy looked at the girl and smiled. The girl came to and shuddered. Typhoon splashed water and offered Visesvit to rub his back. The boy was confused and surprised by such an offer. Universe reminded her that she just said she does not want to rub other people's backs. The girl replied that it only concerned the hero because he treated them and the spirits cruelly, but not the universe, and she wanted to somehow thank her companion for her kindness, even if it was very small. Typhon smiled and continued to persistently offer that boy a favor, pondered, then looked up at the sky. The boy asked not to do it too harshly. The girl agreed. The boy sat on a chair in a towel and waited to be rubbed down. Typhon knelt and smiled, rubbing the boy's back. Typhon looked closely at the scratches on his back. The girl shuddered and stepped back. Speaking about the boy's back, the universe was not embarrassed at all. Typhon looked at the boy from behind and asked why his back was so badly injured. The girl asked why there was a scar on the body with the carved word stupid. The universe began to explain that during his campaign against the demon lord, he was always the bait. He was forced to open chests with traps, searching for treasures, and there were moments when people simply vented their anger on him. As the boy told the story, the girl's face grew darker and sadder. Typhon, no longer able to endure all this, hugged the boy from behind and pressed him to himself, pitying him. The girl began to cry and said, why, after everything he had been through, he tried so hard to help the people around him on the road, because the boy's wounds were much deeper. The universe smiled and replied that the matter was not so much in his body, as in the fact that he did not want the spirits under his care or his inventions to suffer, so that is why he sought to care for those nearby. The girl listened, still crying. The girl gathered her spirit and said that since the boy's body had been treated so harshly, now she was nearby and would wash him well. The girl and her little helpers began actively washing the boy. The man choked with laughter and asked them to stop washing. It tickled him pleasantly and gently. The girl sat down nearby with a smile. The boy returned to the room first and said that he was tired of laughing but had rested well, and now it was time to lay out the futons before Typhon returned. Universe walked, closing his eyes, and wrung his hair with a towel thrown over his neck, then suddenly opened his eyes and froze in shock. Near the futon of that boy sat 7 pretty girls in dresses. The girls addressed Universe as Lord and said that he is the savior of their village, so tonight they must guard his body. One of the girls slyly asked him to accept their gratitude from the bottom of their hearts. The man withdrew in surprise and began to retreat from the woman's hands. And the girls laid the boy on the ground and began to gather around. One of them pulled the belt from the robe with her mouse. She shyly looked at the boy and unfastened the belt, exposing his stomach and chest. The girl touched the boy's stomach with her hand. Universe closed his eyes and begged for salvation. Suddenly the girls scattered across the room, stretching far from the boy. The girls began to fall one by one from the window. Tafona fiercely unleashed her magic, protecting Universe from the annoying ladies. The boy turned to the girl, adjusted his clothes, and thanked her for the rescue. Tafona stood before the boy and felt uncomfortable under his gaze. Her cheeks were burning, and with her hand she gripped the collar of her robe. The boy was about to call the girl, but she interrupted him. Tifon sat down and lowered her head, saying that her power is rough, but she asks him to take care of her. The girl smiled, blushing on her cheeks, and looked at the boy. Typhon said that the universe always cared for her, and now her time had come, she wanted to do it for him. The boy looked at her puzzled, and the girl looked away, blushing from embarrassment. Suddenly Typhon sharply flew up from the floor onto the futon, and asked to be allowed to guard at night so that the boy could get some sleep. The young man glared angrily at the girl, and asked if she even knew what that meant. The girl replied that she did, and began to take out a book. Typhon flipped a page and found a paragraph about night guard. She began to read, and said that first she needed to put the boy's head on her lap. She lifted her head, closed her eyes, inviting the boy to lie on her. The universe lay on the girl's lap. She felt a little uncomfortable, but she started looking for the next step in the book. Typhon decided to check if the boy was comfortable. Saying that she was asking this just before the next step, the boy made it clear with his silence. Everything was fine. The girl thought and said that she had to tell a decent nighttime story. Typhon began to guess what that might mean. The girl understood and began to tell it, and the boy looked at her from above, sitting on her lap. The girl made a scary grimace and began to tell a story that her friend the spirit of Fucha had told her. Namely, that with the arrival of night, a portrait appeared in the girl's music room. The girl couldn't stand it and began to blush, fidget, reproach herself for not being able to tell stories, and then she remembered. The man closed his eyes and sighed heavily, asking if she thought that nighttime stories were ghost stories. Then he got up from his knees and hit his head with all his might. The girl leaned away from the boy and jerked her legs from numbness. Her legs cramped and she felt sick from it. The universe turned to her and looked at her behavior, smiling. The boy returned to the girl and looking at her, saw how gently she was snoring. When he spoke about her sleep, he said she fell asleep so quickly, like a kitten. The man looked at the girl and smiled. Universe came to his senses and thought about how much time had passed since they last had such fun. He began to take out the blanket, while the girl in her sleep thanked the boy and whispered that she was so happy next to him. The boy silently watched and spread out the futon. The universe covered the sleeping girl and thanked her for such warm words. Outside it was deep night, and the boy wished his companion good night. A warning came and the boy began to wake up, getting up from the futon. Everything around turned upside down. Universe went out onto the porch and searched for dormice sleeping on the broken wall. Fallen leaves lay around the sun. The boy picked up the girl, not letting her get scared. The village head approached the couple from behind, wishing them good morning. The old woman nodded and said she saw how well they were together yesterday. Then she added that today they started some repair work, and Mrs. Eden is working diligently so everything is going as it should. Lady Spirit told the workers that the signs would also be useful and pointed forward. Typhon began to wake up. The girl looked at it and, flying away from the hands of the universe, froze in surprise, not understanding what kind of picture it was. The chief replied that the picture was good and added that it showed young men rescuing Lady Eden. The old woman said that the peasants have been drinking Lady Eden's water from the well all their lives. The leader said that the happiness of the residents directly depends on the happiness of Lady Eden, and she just realized this. Grandmother bowed to the hero and said that from now on she would no longer honor the hero now. She would bow only to Lady Eden and her beloved juniors. The universe felt uncomfortable and asked not to do that. The leader smiled at the boy and said that Mrs. Eden sent her and asked to remind the universe not to forget to visit the lady. Typhon and Universe were climbing up the mountain to Lady Idona and talking about the new posters that were hung in the city. The girl said that on one of them she looked like the earth spirit named Nyurukiara. Typhon smiled and replied that this spirit is very popular among everyone. The boy said that to him she is simply a beauty. The boys approached the well. Lady Eden was standing at the well opposite them. The girl held a sword in her hands and said that she was waiting for the universe, adding the word Lord to its name. Miss Eden began to explain. She held the legendary sacred sword from the well, and she asked the universe to take the sword with it. Typhon stepped back in shock and began to speak. The universe's companion began to retell the legend. Supposedly, if you pull the sword out of the well, water will gush out and the weapon will become a water sword. He recalled that people even said, with one swing you can cut the moon. Lady Ed closed her eyes and replied that the girl was right. Universe asked why she was going to give him such a valuable item and began to explain. If the hero ordered it, he would not be able to return Lady Eden's sword. The Lady of the Wells began to tell that as soon as they set off, the hero again demanded the holy sword from her, and she refused him again. Then the hero decided to pour poison into the well once more, and the new poison was much stronger than the previous one. The boy asked with surprise how the hero poisoned Lady Eden's well again. Lady Spirit replied to the universe. To survive herself and to save the village well, she would have to fall asleep at the very bottom of the well, in the water. The lady stood at the edge and said that it was precisely because of this that she allowed the well to dry up. The heroes listened silently, and Eden did not interrupt. Then the lady smiled and said that yesterday she observed Universe's behavior and was once again convinced. He is the one who must take the sacred sword, Eden, into his hands. Lady Aiden's face suddenly changed to an expression of anxiety. She asked to accept this sword, said that it belonged to her, and again asked that the universe always keep the sword close to him. Typhon looked at the boy with pity and also asked to accept Lady Aiden's gift. The girls did not calm down with questions, and the boy firmly took the sword with both hands. Universe began to look more closely at the sword. Universe looked at Lady Aiden and, smiling, said that he would take care of the sword she handed him. Miss Aiden exhaled and tilted her head slightly to the side, smiling at the boy's words. The spirit of the lady from the well smiled and replied that now everything was fine. She still stood at the very edge of the well. The girl spread her arms and began to dissolve in magical light. The boy stood up and did not understand what was happening. Typhon called out to Lord Ida. Miss Ida slowly rose upward, and her body dissolved into space. Still smiling, she told them that they would definitely see her again. Typhon began to speak and worry. The lady knows that if she gives this sword away, it will disappear. Universe panicked and called Lady Odan. The spirit silently watched them and smiled. Almost melting in the light, Eden replied that she was pleased to meet them and thank them for everything. She said goodbye to them. Typhon reached out to her and shouted, begging her to wait, saying she could not just leave because now they were friends. The young man looked sadly at Mrs. Aiden. Somewhere in the mountains, a girl's scream rang out loudly. The sun was sinking behind the peaks, and twilight was approaching. The boys were heading to the village. Typhon quietly cried and wiped tears from her face. Universe silently walked beside her. Suddenly, a voice asked the girl why she was crying. When she looked back, she was amazed. Lady Aiden was sitting by the well. Typhon called Aiden, and the spirit shuddered. Typhon stood as if frozen, poking Eden with her finger, insisting that she was dead. The man silently watched what was happening, his mouth agape in astonishment. Lady Eden replied that she really was in such a state yesterday she wanted to die, but now she was at the peak of happiness from meeting the universe. The noble spirit lady said quite joyfully that now she was no longer tied to the well where the legendary sword lies, and now she can actively travel from one well to another. Lady Aiden thanked the guys for taking on such a burden, the sword, and was happy. Typhon made a face covered with tears. She felt deceived. The universe laughed and rejoiced that now everything was fine. The thin-faced man in uniform nervously tapped the mechanism with the tip of a screwdriver. He thought, this is simply impossible to free his great master Gatsua and appoint him as minister of the universe. The man mentally repeated again and again, this just cannot be. Gatsuin stood by the car and tightened some spare part, thinking that he finally deserved such a position, but the universe brazenly stole it from him, and now he has to somehow compensate for the failures in the past, both his own and those of the fake hero. The man pursed his face with his invention, inhaled anxiously, and mentally told himself that he would do it even better, and that now he would definitely succeed with that barbecue device. In nature near the river on the grass stood an arch pylon with a sign welcoming King Veswamp. Guards stood next to the arch and said that all spirit weddings were cancelled, but the celebration in honor of the hero continues. Another knight replied that this celebration was held in honor of the victory day over the Lord of Demons. Gotson clicked the barbecue tongs every second, while in the background the guards continued to discuss how this meeting could be considered diplomatic. Gotson stood up and addressed the king with sincere thanks for honoring them with his visit. Next to the table sat a gray-haired man with thick mustaches and a beach t-shirt with the face of a hero. Gokun began to say that today for dinner they would serve premium products of their own production, and they would be cooked on a grill they created themselves. King Veswamp smiled and replied that this was incredibly interesting because it was the last creation of Minister Gatsuin. He was considered the best magical engineer in the world. Gatsuin replied that he had heard people complain about the difficulty of controlling the flame in their grill devices, so he did it himself. He took the tongs and confidently declared, "All you need to do is just add the ingredients, turn on the device, and a barbecue worthy of a hero himself will be ready." The king was surprised by such words and rose from his chair. The man suggested that the king himself try the new technology and asked him to turn the mechanism's handle. The king agreed and, turning the handle, said that it was the ignition system. The device exploded right in front of the king's face. People around flinched. The king was engulfed in fierce flames and he screamed. The courtiers rushed to call his majesty. The king plunged into the water. The lordly vassals began to quarrel and accuse Hatsun. They said he had attempted the life of his majesty and that it was all staged because he forced the king to turn the crank. The king lay on the ground and the doctor was treating him. The man raised his hands and said they were mistaken and that it could not have been an assassination attempt. It occurred to him, at home, when he tested the device, there was no such effect. He wondered why it happened now. The spirits enraged behind bars replied, Gatsuin released the universe and then claimed its merits for himself. The spirits of fire and forest twisted their faces in anger and replied that this was simply unforgivable. The vassal rushed at Gatsuden and shouted that the guilty would finally get what he deserved. Gatsuden fell to the ground, covered his face with his hands, and cried out. Suddenly someone called out to the people. The king wiped his face and said that any genius can lose even the most famous, like Gatsuin. The vassal stopped, turned around, and called out to his royal majesty. The king listened. Gatsuin began to explain that he was sorry and that he was not involved at all. Gatsuin Milling said that he did not make up this invention because the master was the same universe that kidnapped the Princess of Spirits. He theatrically shed a tear down his cheek and directed all the blame at the universe, saying that with his invention he washed away the king's murder, and Gatsuin knew nothing about it. The king, confused, asked, "Didn't Hatsun say that he invented the grill and that his name is engraved on the device?" The man realized he had been caught lying. The hero stood up from the chair and told him not to make nonsense and simply admit his guilt. Hatsuvan was stunned by the words of his old comrade. Rayuban glanced angrily at Gotsvakan and thought that this worthless minister must be removed as soon as possible because he endangers everyone. The accused nervously bit the tip of his nail and pondered. He recalled that after the victory over the demon lord, he and the hero ate barbecue together, celebrated every day, and having fun, jointly set the universe on fire, which was about to end. Gutswin began to respond that in fact it was Briben's order and that he confirmed they needed to surprise people to set fire with their barbecue device. Gutseng's audacity knew no bounds. He shouted right in the face. Braben began to approach the man and angrily asked what he was talking about, then replied that he would show him right now. Gutseng grabbed the hero by the neck with his hand and pulled him close. Gatsuin quietly explained his plan to the hero. If he admits guilt, then along with that he would also be held responsible. The plan was to get close to the circle of King Wuzbamp. The hero did not understand what the man was talking about at all. Then Gatsuin began to insist that they should look closely at how the young king was dressed, and if everything burns with youthful zeal, his majesty would definitely be satisfied. The king stood silently and looked at what was happening with disappointment. Having agreed, Braven and Goatswin began their insidious performance. The first enthusiastically presented the barbecue as the greatest invention of the era, deliberately admiring it loudly. The second immediately picked up the act, exclaiming feigned words of surprise. This hero approached the king, placing a hand on his shoulder with ostentatious familiarity, and declared that even such a dandy had already realized this. Another immediately repeated him, and with feigned zeal shouted, "Keep it up." King Waswamp, instead of what everyone expected, sharply and indifferently accused them of cruel acts that they harm people and do not apologize, and he also said that they use arson as entertainment. Continuing his monologue, he contemptuously expressed disappointment. The hero who once saved the world and the greatest magical engineer turned out to be such bad and unbearable people. When the king finished his speech, Breben and Gatsua were greatly stunned by what they heard, and instead of clear objections, only a muffled official address escaped from them, said in a raised tone. His Majesty, also departing, reported that the man who sought refuge in their country was arrested. He wanted to discuss this news during a joint barbecue, emphasizing the importance of this meeting. Finally, Waswamp added that he would pretend as if the meeting never took place. He also noted that he wants to reconsider relations with their country, implying that he is very disappointed and no longer intends to deal with them. After the master left, Braben suddenly burst out and loudly shouted the name of the magical mechanic, so much that his face twisted with rage and malice. He was absolutely furious about the situation and accused Gutsuin of extreme unprofessionalism, and also that from the very beginning he should have kept everything under his own control and not shifted his responsibilities onto anyone else. After catching his breath a little, the fair-haired boy coldly remarked that under other circumstances the engineer could have already been fired, but since the festival was ongoing, he did not finish, only thought about punishment. Now this man was demoted not just to Deputy Minister of the Department of Magical Devices, but to Assistant Minister. This was Braben's decision regarding Gatswin. He was paralyzed by what he heard. He definitely did not expect a demotion. When the festival ended, Gatson sadly walked down the street. Walking alone, he remembered his son's words. He dreamed of becoming a minister like his father. He was filled with bitterness. He would not be able to tell his family about the humiliating 2-level demotion. And because of possible mockery, he would not be able to share this with his close ones. The man believed that during the festival information could not be disclosed, so he firmly assured himself he would return to the minister's position until the next personnel changes, hiding the current state of affairs. These thoughts lifted his spirits, strengthened his determination to reclaim his place, and he wanted to give his all. Walking happily to his office, he heard muffled conversations behind the half-open office door. He carefully looked through the crack. He wanted to understand what was happening there. Behind it, two boys were visible, performing a senseless play. They were smugly praising Adol for how he imitated Mr. Universe, having been appointed to the minister's position. Then, smiling, they began to insist that they had always believed in him, and that he was many times better than some Gatsuan. The peeping Tom was deeply outraged by the words of these people. He rushed into the office with bared teeth, fiercely attacked them, accused them of littering in the wrong place, and even emphasized, "This is not a place for a doll." The noise made them turn around, and their gazes immediately fell on a familiar figure. Quite openly mocking, they addressed him and deliberately spoke, testing whether he could handle such humiliation. They called him by the new title Assistant Minister, as if checking whether he was ready to accept the fall. Filled with anxiety, Gotswen panicked and demanded to know how they found out about the secret details. The answer was a cold-blooded confession. One of them told the nun, who witnessed the events at that fateful banquet. One of those present said he knew about his demotion due to recent behavior and added, "Mr. Universe has now been appointed minister. That is why their strange ritual with the doll was only a rehearsal before the formal reception." The man could no longer endure and shouted that none of this matters, he is still their boss. Suddenly a man enters the hall and kicks Gatsuan. He screams, and the stranger says he is a loser. The man who entered gave his name and introduced himself as the new manager. At that moment, he declared that the gentleman sitting on the floor respected none of his superiors and ordered him to be called by his new title. Repeated physical attacks by Apollon brought the former minister to the floor, failed to hold back a cry of pain, and all this was accompanied by a mocking phrase about his bad luck. Clenching his teeth from unpleasant sensations, Gatsuan promised that upon returning to his post, he would definitely take double revenge. In response, the other only sarcastically admired his zeal, smirking crookedly and clearly not taking the threat seriously. Pell, realizing the slim chances that the man beneath him now, addressed him with a rhetorical question. Would Mr. Universe agree to appoint a minister he had already mocked? And this problem had its answer within itself. The new leader calmly reported that after a joint discussion, they decided to physically attack him, and added, "Universe will only be glad to see his offender in bad condition." He explained that these actions fully compensate for all the previous humiliations they inflicted on the master. With obvious sarcasm, he added, "Now it is their turn to act, in the Hatsujin way, deliberately using this very term." Gatsusan finally realized that his situation was similar to what once was in another universe, and bursting out with a piercing cry of despair, exploded with emotions. From now on, he was ready to perform all the most tedious work of Apollo. The irritated boss sharply ordered his subordinate to leave the room, accompanying this with offensive epithets. His loud shouts, fueled by anger, emphasized the complete decline of the former minister's status. A column of wagons rolled along the road. They were pulled by mechanical horses, and the artificial joints creaked in rhythm with each step. King Vaswamp, sitting in one of the carriages, thought with disgust. He had never imagined that people so vile could be elevated to the rank of heroes. His words sounded like bitter disappointment because of these scoundrels. The guide, addressing the king with due respect, informed him about the proximity of the border and ordered him to look at what was very close by. Despite all the official respect, fear was audible in his tone. The ruler looked out the window and was very impressed. The troops were arranged in letters, forming sentences that blamed Universe for everything so that he could return. Wasvamp's mood, with wilderment, erupted into boundless rage. His thoughts revolved around that unforgivable lack of remorse on the part of his own offenders. He realized he could no longer endure it. While riding along the road, a sign appeared on the roadside, a headlake requado. The king, in a frenzy, ordered the owner to immediately remove the offensive inscriptions, absolutely all of them, every single one. The man nervously replied that everything had already been removed. Looking back, Waswamp noticed a plaque depicting a youth in the company of Princess Typhona. He was shocked to recognize in the image the very same boy Universe. At that moment, the man nearby asked if he knew him. The man enthusiastically noted that this boy was a famous traveler who left behind legendary stories, and they carefully preserved one of them. The king, clearly stunned by what he heard, asked what this amazing story was. The narrator, with considerable joy, reported that this young man not only masterfully prepared exquisite dishes, but also set a world record effortlessly, catching a giant mosen. Thanks to these achievements, he knocked Breben from first place. Having heard this story, the king sadly said that despite all this man is guilty of kidnapping Princess Typhon. Mr. Owner asked if that guy had spirit, because if so, it's complete nonsense. And the girls standing nearby added that they got along wonderfully, just like a couple in love. Passerby noticed this. The princess sharply condemned everyone who mocked the Universities if the insults were flying straight at her. And a girl from the crowd, openly admiring, added that such relationships are extraordinarily beautiful. The king stared again at the image of the boy and the princess. He thought the young master has already caught the biggest Mazan. From this, a smile blossomed on his face. Meanwhile, these two were riding in a carriage. The girl decides to ask her companion if it is possible to drink water from the ponds. He replies that he has heard, in most cases it is potable. He also noted, in the ponds where spirits live, the water is clean and if you drink it, it restores the strength of travelers. The princess suddenly twitched briskly and guessed that Universe gained strength exactly like that during his campaigns, asked what it tasted like, and he replied that the strength came to him without a sip of water, and this shocked the girl. At that moment Typhon had an idea. Since none of them had ever drunk such water, it was worth trying though she herself did not drink it, she really wanted to. So let's head to the water, he said. Somewhere down below, near the road where he stopped during the journey, there is something. The very source of souls. This made the girl happy, and she joyfully declared that they must get there as soon as possible to drink that miraculous water. Typhon and Universe reached the destination while being carried by the mechanical horse trance. The girl says she really wants to drink water from the fountain, and admits she is already so thirsty that her throat is very dry. The spirit's refuge is in the forest, and finding it is not so easy. When the boy was here last time, during the battle with Lord, he was searched for a long time. At that moment, Universe's gaze falls on a strange building in the distance, like a statue. It was unclear what kind of statue it was. The protagonist noticed that this unusual statue is a great landmark. It makes finding the place much easier, but almost immediately, his attention was caught by something else. His attention was drawn to an ancient temple with a carved inscription. This is the Cathedral of the Spring. While the protagonist tried to comprehend the scale of changes that had happened here, Typhon greeted someone. The building's doors opened with a screech and a piercing howl. Hired, the figure of a sister, came out of the doors and at first politely greeted them, calling this place Haven of the Spirits of the Spring, but her calm immediately broke as soon as she recognized an unwelcome guest among the travelers. The girl, recognizing the Universe, literally trembled with indignation. She accused him of unprecedented impudence to come to this sacred place. Her voice, filled with anger, demanded an explanation for why he had come. While he quietly muttered something under his breath, his companion politely and smilingly explained that they just wanted to drink water from the fountain. The hostess, after some thought, reluctantly officially invited them inside, telling them to make themselves comfortable and feel at home. The nun, softening her tone but not losing her vigilance, asked Universe to show respect to the local spirits. Typhon immediately picked up his words, fervently assuring that he would never allow himself to behave that way. The princess, eager to prove her point, addressed Universe directly, but he only excitedly promised to listen until a woman who had led them to the fountain interrupted her. Everything there was decorated and colorful, as if a celebration was about to begin. The girl went to the water. First it quietly bubbled, but she was warned. The water is safe to drink, but she should consider possible effects on the body. Disappointed by this news, Typhon said she could not have imagined things would turn out this way, and the woman sarcastically replied, "Blame the Universe for everything." She said that this young man once came here with a hero squad, and then something happened. He crucified a spirit and used it as a target. If it's hard to believe, you can ask that very hero about it. Continuing the story, the dark-haired woman explained, "Since then, the spirits have kept their distance. That's why everything here is almost neglected. They tried various methods to bring them back here and to make them forgive, so they built a cathedral. These spirits were very timid, but the nun thought, if she patiently waited, maybe at least one would return. She specially decorated everything around precisely for their possible arrival." But then the girl, depressed, almost crying, said that it was all over. Because Mr. Universe appeared near the fountain, no one would definitely return. But her companion declared that it was just a misunderstanding. Not hiding her tears, the lady sharply turned around and shouted, asking what her misunderstanding meant according to Typhon's words. Only then did she see something that shocked her deeply. Typhon turned around and saw that boy was surrounded by so many spirits that he was almost invisible, as if he wasn't there. The woman was so surprised by what was happening that she spoke very loudly about the extraordinarily large number of spirits in spring. She also added, it was almost imperceptible, even the silhouette of the figure behind this curtain of spirits. A question burst out of her like a whirlwind. How did this happen at all? She felt sick, fell down, and fell asleep. The boy and the girl immediately reacted. They ran up, checked if everything was all right, and realized that everything was very bad. They took her to a room, covered her with a blanket, and laid her down to sleep. She developed a fever, and in her sleep she fell into delirium, saying that her friends would not leave her, that she was very lonely here because she was all alone. When she woke up, Typhon gave her water and said it was ordinary water. She thanked him and took a few sips. The girl said she dreamed a dream where a young gentleman was surrounded by the spirits of spring, the ones she was told about. and she was told that it was not a dream. Continuing, she admitted, even if it was a dream, if that boy could summon the spirits, she would be very happy. The nun decided to apologize to the young man for what had happened earlier, for her rudeness in words. To which he awkwardly replied that there was nothing to worry about. Later, the lady invited the guests to spend the night at her place, because it was already too late to set off on the road. The night reached its depths, everyone was asleep irreversibly, and only the universe woke up, sitting in bed. He got up and deliberately, carefully looked somewhere, trying not to wake anyone. As it turned out, he was heading to the garden, where the water intake was located. Everything there was sparkling, covered with decorations. The man began to remove all the decorations. He started speaking quietly as if afraid of punishment for it, as if he saw extraordinary beauty in it. For a moment he fell silent, removing the next decorative element. And for these creatures there was too much light, so it seemed to him, and it could scare them. It turned out that all this time someone was watching him, cautiously peeking out from their hiding place. The universe noticed that thief guardian, and he quietly voiced aloud his thoughts that she had probably just been born, so he gently said that she need not be afraid, because nothing else was shining. He reached out his hand to this little creature, from whom the spirit girl recoiled. She was afraid of him, and said that he could pull her out of there. Closing her eyes, she decided to bite his finger. Her tiny body trembled with fear. Opening her eyes, she saw the bite wound, and that he did not withdraw his hand. He looked at her with a barely noticeable smile. This surprised her. Later, Universe asked her if she had calmed down, and said not to worry, because he was not her enemy. As it turned out, this little one could heal, and she did so by licking the boy's wound. She looked at him with a guilty glance, and he replied that he was not angry at the child at all. The delighted little girl, with eyes shining with joy, said that she wanted to be friends with him. The universe invited him to sit on its palm, with quite a polite address. Then he was surrounded by a crowd of spirits glowing in the darkness. The man was surprised, but still honestly decided to say that, although he was glad to see them all, he did not need to behave the same way as during the day. It was better to approach them one by one if needed. Which the main character immediately regretted, because they really lined up in a very large and long queue. Then he could not resist. He smiled and laughed, and the spirit enveloped him again. Someone else was watching this funny scene from the window. It was a nun. She could not believe her own eyes. The spirits of spring had really returned home. Still in shock, she whispered that they all missed the universe so much, although in theory they should have hated it. Typhon stepped closer and said that he had always been kind to the spirits. That's why they all adored him so much. The girl turned to the boy's companion. She decided to clarify if it was true. She asked if she was a spirit of the wind. The girl apologized for not introducing herself yet and named her own name. The black-haired lady asked the name, a little embarrassedly, saying that it was the name of one of the princesses of this element, to which Typhon replied a little awkwardly, yes, she was that very princess. This caused great surprise and shock in the nun. She was so confused that she couldn't hold back and screamed very, very loudly, so much that it was heard even on the street. From that scream, the universe rushed to them so quickly, asking if everything was all right. It was breathless from what it saw, and its companion stood, embarrassed, pulling at her hair. And the mistress of the house was on her knees, begging forgiveness for the blindness she had shown, because she did not know that a princess was before her. In the spirit harbors, everything is done for them, so they are especially honored here. There is a strict hierarchy, although in the eyes of the public people are considered higher in rank. Typhona tried to explain that there is nothing wrong with this. Little girl, seeing the spirits of spring, exclaimed with surprise and admiration. She asked them if they adored the universe, and without waiting for an answer, said that she loved it too and rushed into its embrace. Kneeling, the girl looked at the two with such sincere amazement. Bound by doubt, she decided to find out for herself why the spirits loved it so much. After all, the spring spirits are especially inhuman and taciturn. The universe looked away, and Typhon answered for it. He radiated such tenderness that enveloped her completely, like the scent of flowers, so she reached out to him like a butterfly, very close. The maiden on the floor bowed her head again, and she sincerely asked him to explain how the spirits could be returned to their refuge. The universe asked why she needed this. She raised her eyes and looked at him sadly. The lady began to explain. More and more forest nearby is being cut down to build a cathedral, and that means that over time it will be completely destroyed and turned into a locking park. Then she spoke louder and led to what it means. If that happens, the spirits will have nowhere to live. Therefore, she asks for help, because it will be extremely difficult for her to cope alone. At that moment, the main character began to stutter and responded about the understandable problem, and after that everyone laughed, especially the mistress of the cathedral. The next day, Universe began to explain what had been done. The creatures from the fountain do not like light, unless it is reflected in the water, so all the decorations will have to be removed. The nun said sadly that she did not know this and, on the contrary, thought that they might like these sparkles. Typhon, having finished cleaning, asked if anything else was needed and offered to clean the water in the fountain, but in response heard that the spirits would do everything themselves. This was explained by the fact that Springswood spirits naturally become cleaner, but in such a state of affairs this could take up to 10 years. But as soon as it happened, gradually even before she could finish speaking, she fell silent. And all because Universe began to hint to the spirits. If someone wants to have fun cleaning the water with him, let them sit on his finger, and instantly a mushroom cap will grow on the finger, but only with the spirits. He said in a joyful voice that now it was possible to have fun, and pointed with his finger to where we needed to fly. The spirits began to have fun and work cleaning the water in the fountain. Everyone who saw this felt childlike joy. It was extraordinarily beautiful and magical. The girl screamed in surprise and looked into the water. It was completely cleaned and, sighing with disappointment, said that she had been foolish, immature, and reckless. She sadly began to tell him that she grew up in this shelter and thinks she knows more about the spirits than anyone else. Typhon came to her to calm her down and stroked her head. She decided to cheer up her interlocutor and said that despite everything, she was diligently trying to understand the spirits. The woman agreed with these words, and the girl continued the monologue. She noticed that the hostess treats spirits as if they were people. Most perceive them as animals, but Typhon expressed her joy with a smile and said that all spirits are very happy when they are treated as equals. The nun understood this and asked if she would stick to this. Would she ever become like her teacher? The girl asked again whom exactly she meant by teacher, and it turned out it was the universe. And that boy was just watching their conversation from the side, already beginning to predict that something was about to happen. The princess continued her point. Unlike her, this boy is much more respected by the wind spirits. The dark-haired lady expressed the opinion that it seemed exactly so. Their teacher is an incredible person. To this, she received the same answer from the girl, who considered him amazing. Happiness flashed in both their eyes. They shone so brightly that they stared into the universe, joyfully said that he is their teacher. The boy was carefully crafting something with a knife. Typhon noticed him and decided to come closer to see what he was doing. Spirits were flying around, watching the whole process. Seeing how the young man was carving something out of wood, she immediately became excited and asked if he could do that too. She asked if he was building a platform for the spirits of the shelter, and the universe replied that yes, and that when he had been here before. The story was interrupted by the nun. She said that the hero seemed to claim he did everything for the spirits himself. The girl replied to her that she did not think it was exactly so. She decided to ask the boy again if it was true, and he got a little nervous. And the same woman, wrapped in an apostolnik, shared her thoughts. Supposedly, that man was evil and treated the spirits cruelly. She couldn't believe it then and dismissed everything. Then she sat down and bent toward the ground, began to apologize for being so uneducated. The universe, embarrassed by this, nervously asked her to raise her head. But she, without lifting her eyes, replied that she was not worthy of this because she had made a terrible mistake by behaving that way with him. While she continued speaking, the lady got scared. She finally realized it was not only her fault. It turned out that another nun from the neighboring cathedral was also to blame. She didn't even know her. The lady had no way to proceed, so both interlocutors, not understanding what was happening, decided to find out. They entered some room on the top floor of the cathedral. Then they removed the cloth from something huge, and suddenly a statue of that person appeared. Typhon covered her mouth in shock and realized it was a copy of the hero who saved the country from destruction. After that, she was asked a question whether she really thought so by the confused boy. The girl decided to find out why this monument existed. The woman admitted that they would have to compete with the neighboring cathedral. They decided to sculpt statues of the hero and see who would attract more spring spirits. Now they had to present this to King Waswamp, and he would choose the winner. After the story, the girl asked her, not understanding how they got to this point. She received a sad answer. Without the spring spirits, they would not be able to maintain this place, so without such measures, the temple could be destroyed. That is why they decided to borrow the hero from each other. But now she understands. The hero's statue does not have the ability to call the spirits, so she does not know what to do next. But Typhon joyfully declares that everything is simple. She also optimistically stated that she could sculpt a statue of the universe. This made the young man blush. He did not expect that the solution to the problem was hidden in his own statue. The woman said that His Royal Highness would arrive in a few days and promised to show him the statue of the hero. Typhon insisted, if the goal is to summon spirits, then there is no need to overthink it. Only after realizing this did the nun agree, and the princess added, especially if they help together, they will definitely manage, and everything will be completed. She asked the spirits if they agreed. And he heard a joyful squeak, a sign of agreement. Two maidservants rejoiced and decided to erect the statue of Mr. Universe. The universe himself refused to build it, because no one erects a statue of themselves. It was clear how nervous he was. Everyone was struck by this message. They gaped, then began bombarding him with questions, and said that he was very knowledgeable about this. To this, the boy replied embarrassedly, yes, but the fact that he would make a statue for himself would put him in an awkward position. Then the girl decided to find out what happened in the village of Aden, but the boy said it was her own fault. Sadly, almost in tears, Typhon asked if these feelings were bad, and said that he was very cool and that many people admired him. Then it will become even cooler for everyone. He resigned himself and began carving his own statue. The girl expressed gratitude for the help and received permission. He only helped a little with the body, so the girl was glowing with happiness. She said that she was very happy that they could work together on something. He replayed Typhon's words in his head about how they should be together, and with relief understood, if she was well, then everything was fine. When the universe finished assembling the body, everyone was delighted and insisted that it was simply perfect. And with full determination, they declared that they would take care of the head themselves. But it was reworked many times, thinking about how it would look better, and it turned out way too bad. They got tired and were already starting to get angry because they couldn't do it right. Some guy came to visit them, but Typhon immediately decided to drive him away. He ordered him not to come closer. The guy, leaving through, if they file the face even more, it will become very small. She screamed inside herself. Her artistic inner beast would not awaken. Then she began to insist that the sculpture was not the embodiment of his idea, but the extraction of the true form of the stone, and sighed heavily. The universe listened silently. A little later he called her, to offer to accept the help of the little spirits of the earth. She was very happy, and the mood immediately began to improve. The girl was stunned. They understand these things so well, and she suggested sculpting universal kunis together. Pouting, she put on glasses, pushed aside her coat, and struck a pose to look even cooler. Maintaining this majestic appearance, she began to direct the process. She said the nose should be made even more crooked, and more splinters should be added to the teeth in the mouth to make the sculpture look realistic. Almost finished, she began to say that she had already seen something very similar and incredible. At that moment, a nun ran in and asked if everyone wanted a short break to eat. Everyone happily agreed, to rest and regain strength. The spirits of spring and earth were also drinking tea and eating sugar. They were happy and had a tasty meal. Even Typhon was happy. The mistress of the cathedral decided to approach and ask if the young man could spare a minute to discuss something very important with her. He hesitated, then answered, mumbling something under his breath. She wanted to learn to get along with the spirits, just as her teacher managed. She also said that she always believed people can only do one thing: scare away spirits, and when she needed to get help from them, she caught them with a net as if they were some kind of insects. But the young lord does not do this, yet still receives help from them. That is why she wondered, how can she become like him? He listened silently and thought, but then he said that they need to be used. He explained it like this: when they are asked to use their power, the spirits are very glad to be helpful, but that does not mean they open up to everyone the same way. They will never help those who see them only as a means to achieve their own goal. Continuing his speech, he explained, the reason is that they are not servants who fulfill wishes. They should be seen as allies with whom you build the future together. And all he wants is for all the spirits around him to always smile, because he constantly cares about it. When he finished speaking, he noticed that everyone was listening attentively and that his words deeply moved them. Even Typhon, almost crying, addressed him formally and asked why he was so kind, because it made him an invaluable ally and partner. Frightened, the universe began to demand that they stop speaking like that. More precisely, please stop. Even now he said it very politely, which made the girls laugh, and then he began to pout. Meanwhile, in the neighboring city, a huge statue of the hero Bribon is visible. The cathedral founder is seen a refuge for spirits, and right now, a cry filled with disappointment echoes within it. The great nun nervously wonders why the spirits of spring do not return after all. They built such a huge statue of the hero. She is very nervous and mutters that if she does not win, she will never become a real nun. Noise arose outside and someone officially called the woman. Gathering her thoughts, she calmly ordered him to come in. The girls came and said that they had brought donations for this week and asked to accept them. She thanked them for their work and quickly said about sending them off, and at the end said that the spirits would bless them. Then she suddenly began to pour coins out of the bag, and taking one, held it between two fingers. At that moment, she suddenly realized something. It seemed to her that the statue did not shine enough, if only to make it even more brilliant, so that it sparkled. She would be willing to bet. The spirits, roughly speaking, would flock to it like moths to a light. And then she would ask to build a shelter for the spirits nearby. Then she would immediately get rid of that holy mother who was in her way underfoot. So she would get that land, a pile of money, and power. She had already begun to dream that she would have everything she wanted and that it would soon become a reality. The nun looked at the chest, decorated with precious stones, and said very sadly that her patrons no longer had any money and that the funds to pay the monks were quickly running out. What made her risk everything herself and the saints of this sanctuary? On the table lay a letter stating, "If the debt is not paid by the deadline, the great nun and 5 saints of this cathedral will be enslaved." The man in the hat congratulated the woman on a successful deal and said that dealing with her was a pure pleasure. She received a very large chest. It was full of coins, and she was simply beside herself with happiness. She thought that now she would definitely become famous throughout the entire entertainment district, and everyone would simply go crazy because of the shining statue of the hero. The nun joyfully threw coins all over the room, thinking that tomorrow King Wasvamp would be present at the opening of the hero statues, so she felt even more confident in her victory. She understood a grand success awaited her. The day came when it would be decided who would win. Someone began to say that now it was necessary to determine which cathedral would become the true temple, and that then the comparison of the statues would begin. "So I give my word to King Lasvamp." The ruler began the evaluation. The first statue, the largest, stands in the Cathedral of Spring, but it is clear that it is only beautiful on the face. Because first of all, it is important how many spring spirits it calls. Great Nulka began to say that they had taken care of this. And as soon as the cloth is removed from the statue's covering, everyone will see the face of the true hero, and the spirits will undoubtedly rush here and overturn the statue standing nearby. At that moment, a younger nun joined the conversation. She apologized for interrupting and said that they had worked hard together to make this statue. Her words broke off and she heard the laughter of her rival, who did not believe that she had sculpted the statue with anyone because she was always alone. Because of this, the girl became numb and sad. The king decided to calm the quarrelsome women by saying that at the signal, they should remove the cloths from the statues. The girls prepared themselves. The signal was given, and they threw off the canvases from the pedestals. The outlines of the statues were already clearly visible. The king, looking at them, was in shock. One of the statues from the ball was completely covered in perfume. A surprise that turned into a scream did not even fit within the bounds of the nun who erected the huge statue. Vaswamp, not understanding either why or where from it all, realized that this sculpture was dedicated to the universe. This surprised her. She decided to politely ask if he knew the teacher. A little nervously, stumbling and stammering, he replied that he did not know him personally, but all this time, whoever among the rulers met with him always spoke only well of the young man. The girl, not hiding her joy, proudly declared that His Majesty was right. Her teacher was a wonderful person. And also, none of the spirits is as popular as the teacher. Even his statue attracted so many beings, although it is only his image. The king listened to the lady and said he understood. He saw how all these spirits smiled just like Princess Typhon. At that moment, the evil nun decided to slander the good one, insisting that all this was untrue, because the spirits are not capable of reaching the statue of the false hero. Continuing to accuse her of lying, she put forward her version. Allegedly, she tamed the spirits and summoned them, otherwise it was unclear where such a number of them came from. She said that this act was disgusting, so the spirits would hate her and would no longer come to her. And at that very moment, the wind rose and everyone froze, feeling anxiety. Velika Nun stopped speaking and became wary. But then she remembered something and smiled mockingly. Starting her speech, she ordered everyone to look towards the forest and declared that it had already begun to cry. She explained this by the fury of spring. At that moment, spirits burst out from there like a whirlwind. There were so many of them that everyone who came to the ceremonial unveiling of the statues immediately took notice. The nun exclaimed with delight that these spirits were flying straight to her hero's statue, and all this flying haze would belong to her. The show was coming to an end, and she loudly ordered the spirits to prepare. She ordered the destruction of the statue of the false hero named Universe, pointed towards the enemy's house, and a flock of spirits rushed there. But her order was carried out exactly the opposite. With all their might, they toppled the statue of Bravin, and it fell with a crash. Fiercely enraged, the woman screamed at the top of her lungs, holding her head, and frantically shouted that this was not the statue that needed to be toppled. She shouted at them incessantly to stop again and again, again and again. Stop. She screamed and begged someone for help, but the statue kept crumbling and crumbling. She realized her future was falling apart right before her eyes. Pieces of rock fell to the ground and onto one of the houses, shattering into fragments and scattering into pieces. The building was collapsing, and from the rumble, people from neighboring houses ran out of their homes and panicked. The woman looked at the destruction, stunned and completely silent. Finally, it was all over. The structures had fallen, and only a cloud of dust remained on the ground. At that moment, several nuns approached the Holy Mother and knelt down. They began to pray and asked her forgiveness for making a terrible mistake, and also begged to return to her refuge for spirits. Smiling, she said that their doors were open to all who would come so they could return. Thus, she proposed, from now on, they would live in harmony with the spirits of spring, following the teachings of the universe teacher. They unanimously expressed agreement, but another Holy Mother stopped them. She, swaying threateningly from side to side, shouted that she would not allow them to leave with her nuns. Even more fiercely, she began to threaten to sell her into slavery and abandon her completely alone. Someone appeared nearby and started insisting that this was exactly where we needed to go. 3 people came with ropes and chains. A dark man walked ahead. He began asking where the saint was who owed him a lot of money. Meanwhile, the woman who had just been shouting started pushing other girls forward instead of those supposedly needed, and ordered them to remove even the Holy Mother. The man began to say that he had many beautiful women at home, so he hoped they would get along and he would earn a lot of money. He told the ladies not to be afraid and that they would like it here. At that moment, someone shouted, "Don't rush." The leader turned around, apparently deciding that the one who said that should be silenced. It was King Waswamp. He declared in an authoritative tone that he forbade touching these people. Those men were completely stunned to see the king himself, and even more so that he defended the girls. They nervously asked him what he was doing there. When he did not answer, they were met with an even harsher counter-question what they were doing there, and most importantly, why they wanted to take those people. The dark man began to pretend to be gentle, addressing the king as "Your Royal Majesty." He showed a paper that said all the holy cathedrals were left as collateral. The ruler read the agreement and confirmed that this was exactly what was written there. But these are saints from Spirit House, not from the cathedral, so they cannot be considered as collateral for this will. The man began to get nervous and ponder. If this is not a saint, then where exactly is the one that is needed? His gaze fell on the second Holy Mother. He raised his voice and said that it was her, clearly not expecting to see someone older. Disappointed, he resigned himself to this fate and ordered the other 2 simply to take her with them. The woman was clearly shocked by this change of circumstances and tried to object. She was put in a cage on wheels, and this man addressed her contemptuously, calling her old. He said she had to work off the money she borrowed, and they did not care what the price would be as long as she was punished. Everyone watched as the carriage tore away, taking the woman with it. Finally, the king returned to the Holy Mother, and although he had not yet managed to say a word, it was obvious she was winning this contest. The girl, overwhelmed with emotion, sincerely thanked the ruler. Then everyone went from Wasvamp to Spearhaven. He expressed great admiration and said that this place is very beautiful, pleasantly simple. He also added that he could even gladly stay here for a few days. At that time, Typhon and Universe were watching the open doors. The man began whispering to his companion that he was asked to pass something on. After a short pause, he spoke into her ear quietly, so no one would hear, saying that they were being hunted for a reason, so they had to find a way to escape. Seeing that his words were ridiculous, the lady laughed loudly. The universe began to calm her down and whisper for her to be quieter, but she decided to call the Holy Mother who stood behind the door. The girl informed the nun that they were leaving and confessed it was their honeymoon, so they wanted to continue it. The young man was shocked by these words. The woman giggled and said she understood them. She guessed she had already suspected they were more than just friends. The princess, also laughing, confirmed the lady's words. The dark-haired girl expressed a desire to also be connected with the spirits of spring, so that everything would be just as harmonious and gentle, and most importantly, that it would be based on mutual trust from the sincere heart. Pausing slightly, Typhon smiled and replied that she was absolutely sure the second one would definitely succeed. The girl asked what the universe thought about it, but it did not answeringly smiled. He saw how the spirits had already managed to establish this connection with the Holy Mother, and the princess also noticed and understood everything. The animals carefully pressed the girl to themselves, and she stood still, not understanding why the teacher did not answer the question. Chernitsia saw the guests off until they got into the carriage and continued on their journey. She sadly waved her hand after them. 2 young girls approached her and blossomed with a smile. The spirits rose into the air joyfully, cheerfully flapping their wings. The universe looked at them and gave a soft, restrained smile. He was happy for this girl because she found not just acquaintances but friends, and she was happy. After some time of riding, they stopped. The boy said they had almost reached the capital of the kingdom, and beyond it was Concantwar. He noted, according to the plan, they have to pass through the capital, but the chances are high. Wanted posters are already hanging at every step. There are many people there, so they need to be careful. The girls suggested changing clothes and hiding under a mask. As if by magic, the princess was already standing in costume, wearing a hat, glasses, and a mask. At the same time, she said her ears were blocked. The boy replied that this costume was rather strange. She quickly realized it was better to change her image, and this time she appeared as a dancer in bright, colorful attire. She asked her companion if he looked like a dancing girl. In her defense, she said that from their town, the music could be heard at a distance. And the universe remembered that right now, there is a festival in full swing in honor of the heroes. He made a decision and told Typhon that they would go this very way, and the girl, filled with joy, replied that it was time to set off on the road. To this, the young man asked not to rush, and the girl, not understanding what had happened, decided to find out why it was not allowed to hurry. He explained if she danced, too much attention would be drawn to her, and they could be caught. Then he asked why she was dressed up then. The girl, frowning, muttered that he should also change clothes. All because it would look strange, how a girl dances next to a boy in an ordinary work shirt. Continuing to convince Universe, she added an even stronger argument. If posters with their faces hung here, then everyone would already know their clothes too. The princess was clearly trying not to run away from being caught, but rather to better see those boys she adored in different outfits, so she smiled boldly and looked at him. She happily ordered him to go and change clothes, while she began picking out clothes for him. The universe silently agreed. Typhon was happy and pleased with herself, so she decided jokingly to ask where such cool guys go, speaking to herself. She dressed Mr. Universe as a rather stylish trumpeter. The boy felt uncomfortable in these clothes and said they looked too bright. The girl replied that this style is currently at the peak of popularity. She also told him the plan. He would play the trumpet, and she would dance, although it seemed strange. But it would not look suspicious. She hurriedly urged him on, but only heard him say her name very loudly. He ordered her not to dare to dance. They reached the kingdom of Waspampu, all the way to the capital itself. It was the peak of the dance competition, dedicated to the festival in memory of the heroes. She liked it so much when they entered the city that she screamed with joy and said how cool it was here, literally shining. Typhon, having fun, suggested dancing with his companion. He suddenly realized in his head that she was not listening to him at all. Meanwhile, people noticed the girl dancing on top of the carriage. Everyone started saying she was cool and even danced quite skillfully. While the young man was steering the carriage, they shouted to her that she was the best, and then he saw wanted posters. This caused him to panic. The stranger looked carefully at the man who was crying, checked everything with the coachman passing by, and stared directly at Universe. This made his nerves start to tremble. He got scared if they were exposed, it would be very, very bad. But it worked out. The man decided to support the girl, called her a beauty, and advised her to keep up the same spirit. The young man sighed, thinking he was almost exposed, and then the princess looked at him and began to persuade him to dance, to which he replied that he does not dance. And adding to his answer, he ordered her to look around, showing that almost every corner had a wanted poster with their portraits. The girl, truly impressed, asks if it is really him, because on the sign he looks nothing like himself, like a different person. Universe gets confused and asks if it is true, and she says that there he looks more like Braben. Typhon decisively declares that he will not leave it like that, and deliberately intends to climb down from the carriage to tear down all the posters, but the young gentleman stops her. He explains if she does that, it will be a criminal offense, because tearing down the necessary announcements is not so easy. She reluctantly agrees, let her dance, but the main thing is not to touch the posters. The girl agrees with the boy, but decides to remind him that it is not necessary to travel so often on the main streets in such moments. It is better to stay in the shadows to avoid attracting unnecessary suspicion. Jumping onto the roof again, she is about to start dancing. And he, looking at the princess who ran upstairs, smiled and whispered, since she says so, he will do the same. The festival has already unfolded in the square. Someone began the solemn opening of the main event of the celebration in honor of the heroes. The orator informed everyone that the best participants of the dance contest were already waiting, and invited those who wanted to make a name for themselves to come onto the stage. He continued to tell the details of the competition and said that the winning team would receive a prize, and Universe thought to himself, the residents of the capital probably love to dance very much. The first contestant came onto the stage. He called the girl on stage very cute, assuring that everyone else thought the same, and also said that she had already won in the visual category, trying to encourage her like that. At that moment, Universe realized. Typhon appeared on the stage and understood that this was already too much. She began her performance by saying that she was not only very gentle and beautiful, but also an excellent dancer, and added that she was completely confident in her victory in the dance category. The female orator was stunned by her words, so hearing that she called herself the winner, concluded, this means that she is extremely brave, and the audience began to rejoice and have fun. He said that now he had to see how she dances, so let her call her musicians. Confused, she did not understand what he meant and asked again which musicians he was referring to. He quickly replied, as if from a script, dancing without music will not work because every dancer must have their own personal instrumental support. Instrumentalists create stunning sounds using the most modern electronic instruments. This activity is also very popular among young people. In despair, Typhon left the stage. Her companion called her by name, and she replied in the same sad voice. She decided to consult with him about what to do. She had already been told that to participate in the dance competition, an assistant instrumentalist was needed, so she wanted to figure out how to handle this. The girl told Universe-kun that she had always dreamed of dancing with people from the outside world. She thought she could do it as soon as she married the hero, but he did not allow her. She was already crying and said that she finally wanted to dance in front of everyone today, then asked if he could come up with something. The young man had just realized that wind spirits loved to dance, but Typhonka herself could not allow herself this because she was a princess, and yet he took her to the dance capital of the world and forbade her to dance, calling her by name. He firmly told her, it does not matter whether he can play electronic instruments, he will still do everything that is required of him, so he promised that he would definitely get the girl on stage. His words sincerely impressed and moved her. She immediately rushed to say that she would participate. When she returned, she said that she was told to come later. The young man replied that he understood, thought about it, and Tafana became sad. He apologized for making her worry, and the girl said it was nothing serious. And the universe, deciding once again to cheer her up, declared that it would never give up for the sake of the spirits. She froze for a moment, then smiled and said that his words were so different from the promises of that hero, as if proving that he truly believed in his friend. After all, a true hero will do everything possible to become famous worldwide and will never give up. Therefore, he wanted Typhon to give up everything she had and sacrifice everything for him. And also, between a hero who tries to be the best at everything and Mr. Universe-kun, the spirits will choose the master precisely because you differ from him in everything. The girl also decided to recall that her current companion once asked her to dance for him. She wanted to sit down, and the young man wanted to say that it was better not to sit there, but he had no time. As soon as she sat on something, she suddenly twitched and screamed from sharp pain. The boy and the girl decided to see what was there. It turned out to be a gramophone setup. Universe appreciated this device and said that inside it was well assembled and very durable, meaning it could be used. He read the inscription that the product was made in Doodle, and something reacted to these words. A voice sounded from the installation itself. As it turned out, they were forest spirits. They asked the couple if they knew Dole. The man replied that he was well acquainted with it because he was a carpenter and worked with sound, and the spirits exclaimed in amazement. Many used to dance to it before, but today's youth have already started to prefer metal boxes. Then the young man came up with the idea to ask them to play their music for the guys once more. They agreed immediately and said they would do it for him with pleasure. However, they asked if he was an amateur because those young people generally did not intend to give him any chance. And he assured them that it was not so, he just really needed that this girl would go on stage again. And Typhon became interested in the appearance of these spirits and called them very cute. And she added that she really wanted to dance to their music. She gently asked them to dance together, promising that it would be very fun. They thought a little. And then they decided to agree, referring to how the girl suggested pleasantly joining her. The universe erased the sound from the gramophone, and just then some guy entered the hall and shouted to call Typhon to the stage, ordering her to prepare. The speaker informed the guests that the dance contest was coming to an end, and the last team of wind dancers was coming on stage. The audience burst into applause and ovations. Meanwhile, some guy and girl were dragging the gramophone onto the stage, even counting. People began to look at these boards, not understanding what kind of wooden wonder they were carrying. One of the guests said, "This is a gramophone. His father had one like this when he was little." Words of surprise came from everywhere when everyone realized this device is very old, and someone even managed to throw out a thought, saying that for such a girl one should play on a synthesizer. Typhon snatched the microphone from the host and began to speak. She decided to interrupt this conversation with the words, "Don't say that, let them just listen. After all, it will be a wonderful performance, and the legendary DJ Universe will come out to play." The crowd began to buzz even louder, saying they had never heard anything like it, and the guy near the gramophone was already nervous. But the spirits decided to lift his mood. They said not to worry, they would take care of everything, because they were also here to have fun. He smiled and Typhon turned to him, also smiling, and sincerely said, "Thank you" to the guy, because for her it was exactly the moment she had been waiting for a long time. However, Universe said it was too early to thank, they had just started, so they began their numbering.